Hey, stop it. Shut up. Hey, stop it. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Christy. I'm just checking in with you to see if you think we're ready on the staff side.
Yes, we're all set on the staff side.
Awesome. Let's jump in then. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to welcome our call to order, the March 1st meeting of the Economic Development Committee. Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
United States
of America,
and to the
republic
which
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and
justice for all.
all.
All right, very good. Could I please get a roll call?
Yes. Chair Kimball?
Here.
Vice Chair Hoffman?
Here but muted. And
I am here. It's just trying. I'm using yet a different computer. Somewhere on here is the mute button. I'm here. Thank you. I apologize.
Committee Member Dutoit?
Here.
Committee Member Peterson?
Here.
All present.
Thank you, Melanie. All right, I guess we're rolling straight into public comment. The first of these three opportunities. On my voice, anyway. All right, so here's the. Are you guys hearing an echo?
I'm getting a bit of the Lou Gehrig, as they say. So yes.
Let's all mute our computers.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me, Christy? Okay, great. All right. So here are the rules on public comment. A couple ways to participate. If you saw the instructions online, you can join the Zoom call. And if you're on our Zoom call and would like to speak at public comment at this time, you would go down to the bottom of your screen and you should see a little raise hand icon. You just push that and then we can see your hand up and we will call you in order. And alternatively, if you happen to have called in on a phone line, you can press *9 and we will see that you are wanting to speak. And then when we call on you, you will press *6 on your phone to actually allow us to hear you. So with that, I'm going to take a look. I have one hand up, so I'll go ahead and start with John David. John David, good evening. Are you there?
I sure am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Wonderful. First I want to say I'm just really happy that we're at this spot with parking and zoning. I think it's amazing, and I think I certainly appreciate being part of it. So I just want to thank you, and thank you for taking it this far. I'm excited about it all. I read both reports. I thought they were both great. I really enjoyed their content. So I just want to make some quick comments, just so you know where I stand with stuff. Regarding the parking, I'd like to see the smaller commercial establishments exempted from parking, either 3,000 or 5,000 feet exempted from parking for at least the downtown area, which really should be a pedestrian area. I believe one day it'll be exclusively pedestrian. And if you opt to choose a lower number, meaning 3,000, then at least exempt the first 3,000 and then allow parking requirements for everything above that. So I'd really like to see that. I think it applies to the needs of our downtown area. And I also like the idea of not requiring additional parking for a change of use, as well as allowing a certain amount of additional footage without a parking reduction. If you're going to go that direction, I would suggest 20%, not 10%. I just think we need to go bold and just focus on some stuff that moves the needle, because parking has been such an issue for so long. And then as far as the economic development study, again, I thought that was great. I think I just want to point out that it stated the average resident in Hermosa is 39 years old. So I just wanted to point that out, and we just have a different mix of residents now. So this isn't the same Hermosa it was 20 years ago, and I think we need to give the 39-year-olds and the 40 and 50-year-olds and 60 and 70-year-olds kind of a newer, exciting Hermosa Beach. As far as the rental rates, I'm pretty close to what that is. I know about all the stuff, and I did want to add some context, because the rental rates for Q4 2020 most likely represent the past, not necessarily present, because commercial leases span multiple years. And recently there's been a shift. The retail, at least in Revere Village, they've surpassed Hermosa in downtown Hermosa in rental rates. So it just kind of indicates, we've got some work to do. You guys all know I love mixed use. I think it's important. I don't have a lot of time, so I have some other stuff I want to say to that. But I just, I want to push mixed use, love co-working. I can easily see work-live lofts where some entrepreneurs move in and then they build their business and move out and move their workers in. So I think it's great. Last point, I know I'm out of time, is love the idea of parking. I think Suja has this idea at the Civic Center. I love the idea of parking on the uphill. I never really thought about it for this report, but if you have it above, just on upper pier, above upper pier, then it inspires people to walk all the way down throughout the downtown area. People who park down near the beach are just unlikely to want to walk up the hill. People tend to be lazy. So anyhow, that was my comment, but mostly just thanks, guys. I really, really appreciate it. I think I love both reports, and I'm really happy we're doing this.
John, thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. I see Laura Pena with her hand up. Laura, you're up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, I want to thank the committee and the staff for the opportunity to provide feedback and perspective regarding the parking presentation and the market study. As a member of the advisory group, I really appreciated Martha Miller's targeted recommendations in hopes that it might stimulate this exact conversation. I recommend that in order to measure the success of these objectives, we need to define what it means to be successful. We need to learn from the lessons from our past. If we do not agree on what success looks like, then it could be another upper pier revitalization attempt that I think some in the city thought was successful, but many of our businesses and property owners did not. So first, I just wanted to be mindful and of the recommendations that if they don't go far enough, like in the section of the adaptive use, only allowing 10% of additional square footage, maybe adding a storage closet or a bathroom, it isn't a realistic incentive to encourage the cost of building something that may cost $10,000 to $30,000. So if we're not willing to be bold and maybe provide an additional 30% without requiring parking, it may not create that incentive that that was looking for. Second, I strongly recommend exempting small businesses from those parking requirements within the recommended 5,000 limitation, particularly in the downtown where we're trying to encourage walking and biking. And in Upper Pier, if we had that additional parking in the Civic Center, that would help create that additional foot traffic to walk through and enjoy our downtown. Right now, there is a bill in the House that creates tax credits for electric bikes. If we truly want to be a city for the future, let's plan with that in mind. Thirdly, I highly recommend we encourage simple adjustments like tandem and mechanical parking where available. We need to break down the barriers and really help our community thrive. As far as the economic market study, I did not have the opportunity to provide feedback. I just recommend in the future, in order to instill trust in these reports, if we could provide transparency in regards to who they spoke with to kind of understand the neighborhoods and businesses represented, because each area in our city is distinct and the needs and demands could be different. For example, they stated in the parking section that, quote, restaurants in particular are less concerned about parking. This was not the opinion of all restaurants in Upper Pier, and it definitely doesn't represent this service sector in our area. I do agree that most every business owner I've spoke with enjoys the outdoor dining decks. So if we can support this type of vitality and experience, it'd be extremely beneficial to our community. And finally, I highly recommend and encourage providing for mixed use development where our employees could afford to live and work in our beautiful town. I really feel the energy and excitement about these proposed changes. We could really partner to create a thriving and exciting community where residents and businesses could really be proud of. So let's be bold and courageous and co-create our future together. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, I do not see anyone else with their virtual hand raised on Zoom. So if you're on the Zoom call and you would like to speak, you should see a raise hand option at the bottom of your Zoom screen, little hand. And we can see that you would like to speak. If you are on a phone line, you can press *6 and simply speak up and let us know you're there, and we will take your comment. Taking a look. All right. All right. Last call at this juncture for public comment. There will be 2 other opportunities. If you missed this one, I'm seeing no hands. Anybody on the phone? I don't even see anybody on the phone line. So, all right. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment at this time, and we will move forward with our agenda. And next is approval of the minutes from the February 1st, 2021 meeting. Any questions from my colleagues or a motion to approve?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Dito. Thank you for the second, Commissioner Hoffman. Seeing no indication for comments, I will go ahead and ask for a roll call. Please, Melanie.
Chair Campbell?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hoffman?
Yes.
Committee Member Dutoy?
Yes.
Committee Member Peterson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Moving right along to item number 6. Item number 6, the long-awaited and much anticipated report on the zoning code updates with regard to parking presentation. I will pass it over to Ken Robertson, it looks like, and Melanie and Martha. Who would like to kick it off?
Good evening, committee chair and committee members. I will kick it off with just a brief introduction to Martha Miller and Associates. I think, as a lot of you know, she's been working with us for over a year. Her firm helped with the zoning ordinance assessment, and now we are really moving forward to getting some movement on the zoning code changes. And we work closely with her with these targeted amendments. It's been great to bring someone like Martha and her team who have a lot of experience doing zoning code updates for other cities to give us that perspective and to provide them with our own experience with Hermosa Beach, and it really brings us a great product. So with that, I will let Martha go ahead with her presentation, and of course I'm available if there's any questions.
You can.
Great. Well, thank you. So I have a short presentation to introduce the effort and give some background, and then summarize some options to consider that we'd like your feedback on. And while we are working with the city on a comprehensive zoning code update, this is kind of a subset of that, where we're looking at some targeted parking related amendments. And they're really kind of surgical amendments to address a couple of pressing needs in the city, including lifting barriers to development of a variety of housing types, promoting the economic vitality of the commercial areas, and supporting small scale commercial establishments. So there are these really kind of targeted surgical amendments so that while the city recognizes that a wholesale look at your parking requirements, your parking management, your whole kind of parking system is necessary and is happening in different capacities, there's some important things to address kind of sooner rather than later. So we've been working with staff to identify these amendments that could make a difference and that could kind of be in sort of an umbrella that could be put into place in the most kind of expeditious manner possible. So there are some, I just want to recognize that we recognize there's more to look at, but this is kind of purposefully kind of limited. So again, looking at parking is nothing new in the city. You've had a lot of conversations about it with Plan Hermosa, your downtown core revitalization, your parking management study. When we did the assessment of your zoning code, we had a series of recommendations kind of around parking and the parking requirements in your zoning code. And those recommendations were really based on, what some lessons that planners have learned, of our over 50 years of thinking we could solve all of our problems by just requiring parking. And we've seen that approach really hasn't worked or has had some unwanted effects, a number of them. And I think the first two on this slide are really relevant to the situation in Hermosa Beach, in that parking requirements can reduce the viability of reusing existing buildings, and it limits options for development on small or awkwardly shaped sites. And this is relevant in Hermosa because Hermosa is primarily built out and as a city has a very kind of small lot development pattern. So you don't really have a lot of room to work with. And oftentimes in order to provide more parking, you actually have to remove existing development. So in a way, you're kind of losing some investment there. And that's really a barrier to investment. And it also encourages some tear down and rebuilding. So it's really in kind of recognition of this and consideration of looking at the collective of city goals, including those for economic development, having walkable areas, sustainability, public health. We're really looking at more ways of addressing accessibility versus just providing parking. And we're kind of considering a notion that, a parking problem or a perceived parking problem is better to have than a vacancy problem. And also some recognition that parking really doesn't equal access. It's not a true one-to-one relationship. And in fact, there's a lot of factors that play into it and dynamic factors that are changing. And I think the city saw this represented to a certain extent in this summer when beach visitation was at an all-time high, despite some closure of numerous public parking areas. So it just kind of demonstrates it's not, parking and access isn't necessarily a one-to-one relationship. So again, we're looking at the comprehensive update to parking requirements as part of the zoning code update, but couple of things, including the housing element update, which you have in progress, and some additional challenges to commercial businesses due to COVID kind of warranted some earlier consideration of, again, some parking related amendments that we can kind of accomplish in an expeditious manner. So we have some recommendations for options to consider that we really grouped into kind of 5 areas. And the first 3 are more about exceptions. The fourth one is more reduction in requirements. And then the 5th is about flexibility. So I'll just summarize each one of those. The first is supporting and encouraging adaptive reuse and enabling adaptive reuse. So your current requirements right now is if a use changes to a more intensive use, you have to provide parking for that increase of parking requirement. Except in the downtown, which is actually a little more restrictive in that non-restaurant uses less than 5,000 square feet. If that changes to a restaurant, you have to provide all the required parking. So that's a real barrier, again, because most places really don't have extra area to provide more parking. So some options to consider are you could citywide allow a change in use without requiring additional parking, provided there's no change in that building square footage. So if it's just kind of interior improvements happening and just that interior change of use, you could allow that without requiring additional parking. You can put some limitations on that if the city would like. You could limit that to certain areas. You could limit the size of the building that qualifies, or again, you could allow it citywide. Coupled with that is also allowing for a limited amount of square footage. And some of the people that called in kind of touched on this. So there could be some amount of addition that you allow without requiring additional parking. And that's to accommodate, changes that might be needed with that change in use. Maybe an additional bathroom is now needed or storage area. It could allow some flexibility for that. And then above that, whatever that threshold is, you could require that additional parking needed to be provided. The second kind of option is related to supporting small establishments. So really encouraging small commercial establishments. So those could be, the concept is that you could exempt these from parking requirements in order to encourage them to occur. And with that, and some of the people who called in touched on this as well, there could be some size limitation for that. I believe Redondo Beach has a limit of 2,000 square feet. You may consider 3,000 or 5,000 square feet, which kind of captures some of the sizes of tenant spaces that we looked at within the city. You could cap the number of exempt spaces per development or per parcel if there's some concern that, a parcel might put too many small commercial establishments and they'd all be exempt. And then you'd, in effect, have a large development with no parking. You could cap the number of exempt spaces per development. You could limit locations, just allow this in pedestrian districts. You could limit the types of uses if you have some concerns regarding certain uses such as bars or so on. The third item is really geared towards supporting on-site outdoor dining. And I'm talking on-site outdoor dining, which is different than like, say, a parklet or something you might have in the right-of-way, which is on a different kind of program and a different permit review. But this is like on the private property, so on-site. And, this was desirable before COVID. It was critical during COVID. And I think as we move out of it, as we're still at reduced capacity and people for who knows how long may not be comfortable eating indoors, it's important moving forward. So in order to support on-site dining, the city could exempt the first 400 square feet of outdoor dining from having to require parking. And that would include rooftop dining. Kind of related to this and related to supporting outdoor dining is also allowing the associated restaurant or food establishment to provide the same service in the outdoor area that it provides indoor. And that would include alcohol and table service. So whatever operation happens indoor and moving outdoor, the restaurant could mimic the same service. The fourth item is residential parking, and your current requirements are really kind of this one-size-fits-all approach where every unit is required to provide 2 spaces plus 1 guest space. And this doesn't support or recognize the variety of housing types. And it also limits design options as, again, you have that smaller lot pattern in Hermosa. And when you think parking has to be accessed from the street, what results is that parking and garages really dominate that residential street frontage. And it really kind of impacts the design and the aesthetic appeal with that. So some options to consider and what a lot of cities are doing is really scaling the number of parking spaces to the number of bedrooms. And especially when we do these kind of incremental or these kind of surgical amendments, we always look for clues or a foundation in your existing code and your existing regulations. And you do this already with senior and affordable housing. So one option to consider is taking that same approach for all housing, really scaling the number of parking spaces to the number of bedrooms. And again, that's pretty consistent with what jurisdictions are doing as we as places update their parking requirements. And then the final grouping is really about flexibility. So when parking is required, some flexibility in evaluating whether that number is appropriate, and then also some flexibility in how it's designed. So you have that, again, you have this in your code already in that through a parking plan, the Planning Commission can approve a reduced number of required parking spaces. But then under certain provisions for these, the code actually includes some limitations to that. So it kind of codifies limitations to this discretionary review that would happen anyway. So an option to consider is really getting rid of those built-in limitations and allowing through that discretionary review, allow the Planning Commission to really weigh the merits of the request and make those decisions, again, based on the request and the information in front of them versus kind of already having hands tied just by virtue of the code. And then finally, flexibility in design. You do have some allowances for tandem parking, mechanical lift in your code. It just, I think we'd like to take a look at it and refine some allowances for flexibility to make sure that there's allowances for that tandem parking, for valet parking, and mechanical parking where appropriate. So that really kind of summarizes what, as we look at, as we've talked to staff, made observations and looked at your code, what we'd recommend for tackling those targeted parking amendments. And so we'd like to get some feedback from you, and also Ken, if I've missed anything that you wanted to highlight, appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Martha. I don't have anything to add. I think I'm looking forward to hear what some of the questions might be and the input from the committee.
Okay, I'll go ahead and look to my colleagues. Let me see if I can see them all here and see if they have any questions for Martha or Ken or staff in general. Yes, Commissioner Hoffman.
A couple of questions. First of all, I wonder, Ken maybe would speak to this. Martha, I think, is still just getting into the thing. I'm wondering how many lots in the commercial area are going to fall under 5,000. In other words, as we're thinking about if you were to put a limit on it, we don't want to make a limit that would preclude virtually all the small lots. And I'm thinking out loud as I'm listening to her this evening as well. If we pick 3,000 feet and we've got 30 by, and I'll be honest, I don't know the depth of the lots on Upper Pier, for example. You know, if it was a 30 by 90, like so many of our residential lots are, and you picked arbitrarily 3,000, well, then that basically takes care of all of them. If it's a 2-story, I'm wondering how we would come up with that number without having kind of a site survey of the lots within the commercial area. And then the second thing that as I was listening this evening and listening also to the public comments that we've had, which were things that I think I've heard at least at the stakeholders meetings as well, strong support for mixed use in the commercial area. So everyone's clear, office upstairs above commercial downstairs isn't mixed use in the zoning world. That's permitted under the current zoning. So mixed use, I'm assuming everybody's talking about residential above, commercial or retail below. And then I'm wondering, okay, if we were to do that and then added in some of the parking proposal changes that we're talking about in terms of a half for 1 unit or 2, you know, do something scaled to the bedrooms, what the impact would ultimately be on commercial development. Because my concern, and I've tried to express this before, my concern is that, speaking as a member now of the Economic Development Committee, I don't think we need to do much to stimulate our housing market. What we need to be working on and stimulating and thinking about here more is our commercial and office and retail economy and the restaurants and all the rest. And we know, I mean, simple logic, you know, we all know if we allow mixed use residential in the commercial zone, that's what we're going to get. And it's not going to address, again, Martha and Ken can be, I'm not sure how we could make that address our RENA and those kinds of things, thinking about the simultaneous problem here with the housing element, unless we somehow condition those upper story residential units to somehow conform to some level of affordability, in which case you would remove the economic incentive for anyone to do it. And so it becomes a catch-22. So I'm concerned about how we facilitate commercial retail development if we reduce parking, and I'm all for that. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying, although I'm curious to know what percentage of properties and how we would come up with the right number for Upper Pier, for Lower Pier, for Hermosa Avenue, and so on. But also that might be linked if we're inclined to go ahead and say, yeah, we're going to allow mixed use residential in the commercial district, how we would then tie the parking in. Do we do overlays, you think, over these areas? Like we've already got an SPA on Upper Pier. Would we have different zoning standards in an SPA in the commercial districts? Thoughts about any of that? And I don't know if those were questions or if those are just me expressing my confusion over where some of this would necessarily lead us. And the problem is, as we all know, there's so many moving parts here. We're doing the housing unit, we're doing the zoning code, and then we're looking at parking kind of separately. It's too many balls in the air for me to deal with, I guess.
Thank you, Peter. Looking to Martha or staff if they want to respond to any of those particular concerns.
First of all, regarding the mixed use question, and I'll get to the lot size issue, which I think is a great point. Really not trying to tackle that tonight. I mean, I know we always talk about how everything's interrelated, but Plan Hermosa right now does not have really accommodation for mixed use like people have been talking about. That'll be a very important part of the housing element discussion, because that would require amending our general plan. And then if there is interest at that point, then we would be looking at that in the comprehensive zoning ordinance update. So I think that some level, I think those are great questions and thoughts. We're getting ahead of ourselves even though we heard comments from the public, to talk about mixed use when we're dealing with these targeted parking amendments. So that would be my point on the mixed use question. It's a discussion we need to have, and it literally requires revisiting our general plan. So we got some ways to go on that. Regarding, I think, when we talk about our options for exempting some small commercial establishments, of course, we're talking about the building square footage, not the lot size, but I understand that there is a relationship. So, I think we're just looking for, at this point, if the scale sounds about right, 3,000 to 5,000 square feet, we can fine tune that. And I think that would be a good way to fine tune that. Would be looking at kind of our common lot sizes in our different commercial district and what makes the most sense in terms of the size. So that's certainly something we can add to the discussion. So I think that's a great piece of input. I don't know, Martha, do you have any thoughts about committee member Hoffman's comments?
Yeah, I would just kind of reiterate that, we're at the conceptual stage, and that's exactly the input that we're looking for is, what in moving forward should we pay attention to and refine. But before we went too far, we wanted to make sure first that there was, we were on the right track. So Ken's right. We kind of threw out those numbers, 3,000 to 5,000 square feet. But we would, depending on kind of people's knee-jerk reaction to that, and then looking at tenant spaces and common lot sizes, we'd refine it when coming forward with a proposal.
And if I could just add real quick, my concern is not that I'm opposed to it. Rather, my concern is this sort of, Ken would recall when we did the thing about small lots, and we literally did a count of how many small lots would be affected. I think if you told me that it would affect 10% of the businesses in town if we did 3,000, but if we did 5,000, it would affect 60%, something like that before we can go too far with making a recommendation. Although, again, so everyone's clear, I'm all in favor of reducing and or eliminating parking requirements for those small, especially the older businesses, Hermosa Avenue, downtown. Although, again, I'm being a little naive. I'm not sure how many places we have on PCH that might also fall into that, although they're, and some of them, the space behind is theirs, and in some cases it's city property. So it just will require a certain amount of site inventory, I guess, to come up with the right number. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. Yes, Commissioner Peterson.
Yes, couple of questions. If I could could you flip to the next slide? Because where it says next steps, because I think it just gives us there you go. So you're taking our feedback here. We have another meeting Wednesday. And then from there, this just really brief, sorry if I'm stealing your thunder, but this will go through Ken and Martha, Planning Commission for approval, and then City Council for approval. So, to Pete's point, I know that city staff does a terrific job of identifying the specific locations and numbers of lots that are these different square footages. So we'll have a chance at that point to kind of weigh in, correct, and discuss this to our heart's content.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And we'll actually be bringing you the detailed ordinance language that'll be also vetted through our attorney's office. So we would definitely be getting into those fine level of detail.
Okay, yeah, because sometimes it's hard to see when these square footages, but then if you can drive by a lot and say, okay, it makes total sense that they be treated in a certain way. So I appreciate that. And to Ken's point, I mean, there have certainly been voices through this process around mixed use, but that's not specifically allowed for in the plan. And this focuses more on the plan. I just have a couple more specific to point 4. I think that makes a lot of sense. I've been sort of, to me, it's funny when we just talk about a unit, or even in our conversations on the RENA, like a unit, it could be a 1-bedroom apartment or a 4-bedroom home, or this just makes more sense. So I like that. I like the direction that's going. And then a question on item 3, which is on-site outdoor dining. Going back to lot sizes and visuals, I was trying to understand, sounds great, but what does that mean for, does not require additional parking for the first 400 square feet? Where would this 400 square feet come from? Would that be part of a, like, it's hard to visualize unused land in the city anywhere. So would that mean they're co-opting part of their parking lot, or is this part of a redevelopment? I mean, what would, if that's 400 square feet was indoor on-site versus outdoor on-site, what would that mean? Is it exclusively rooftop? Do we have a lot of places that are zoned to allow rooftop dining? Question mark.
I think I could give you some Committee Member Peterson, some visuals. Like if you think of, again, notwithstanding the decks out in the public right of way, like think of what Rockefeller did, or Hook and Plow, or let's say the Green Store. There are those little pieces of private property. And to give this some context, we do have a program now where you can do 200 square feet of on-site additional outdoor dining with an administrative permit. But again, it's limited to 200 square feet, and it's very restrictive in the sense related to the second point that it's no alcohol service. It wouldn't give you that ability to have the same amenities that you have inside. So, and again, I think a key point is the roof decks or some other creative way that they can carve more space out of their private property. And I think you'd be surprised how there are opportunities out there that you might not think of. I'm trying to think of some other examples. Chef Melba's has a small area that they can take advantage of the 200 square feet that's in the code now, but they wouldn't be able to serve their beer and wine out there. So this is a kind of an incremental help to give them a little more square footage to make that more of an administrative process.
Okay, all right. Yeah, at a high level, that makes sense. I was trying to understand, but I mean, in terms of alcohol outdoor versus not, I mean, Pure Plaza, you certainly can serve alcohol outdoors. So is it a question that those spots are conditionally?
Those spots were already approved under some previous parking approvals. So there's some cases out there where it can be very restrictive. Like, there's been examples that I just can't think. It's a way to some of those barriers that just allow some creative converting of space that's unused towards some outdoor dining.
Okay. I appreciate the clarity in those. Martha, I appreciate your help. I think we're heading in the right direction here. And I mean, I think, our codes and our zoning are sort of self-imposed limits to, make sure that we have a great community and keep it. So I think the goal is not more, but the goal is better. So if there's things we can do that are creative, that make our city better, that's what we want to do. And I think this informs that. So I appreciate your help. I know we'll have a couple more times in the batter's box, the 4 of us here. So thank you. Those concludes my questions and comments.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, definitely more cracks at that. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Detoy, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We always, get compared to Manhattan or Riviera Village. What kind of, I know that you mentioned Redondo Beach has that 2,000 square foot rule. What are kind of the neighbors doing as well in regards to the parking requirements, et cetera, et cetera?
That's something we can look into more. And I don't know, Martha, if you have any comments on this, but there is a variety of approaches. Manhattan Beaches is very unique, where they allow improvements up to a 1-to-1 FAR before they start requiring parking. We didn't really see that as being applicable to us, but I don't know, Martha, do you have any responses on how much you've looked into neighboring cities or even other coastal cities or other cities in California? Because I know you've worked for a lot of cities.
Yeah, and so I've worked on parking requirements for cities throughout California, coastal cities, beach communities, and these concepts are kind of taken from all those, but we really started with what Hermosa has, what Hermosa's issues are, and kind of like the work that's been done, the conversations that have been had. So we can kind of show you what other cities are doing, but these really came from really looking at Hermosa specific issues, things to conversations that you've been having, and then taking tools that a number of jurisdictions use. So we didn't really, in offering tools, we didn't limit it to just kind of what neighboring areas are doing, because there's so many factors that play into resulting development. And also sometimes your neighboring cities might not have good parking requirements. So we don't want to take too many cues from that. So like I said, we can certainly kind of provide you some summaries of those for comparison, but these were really built or developed, unique to what we heard and observed in Hermosa.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. As we get the platter of options and as we go through this process and go through the study session on Wednesday and then the various meetings upcoming discussing that, I think, seeing everything put together kind of will give us that path forward and seeing what the community definitely wants. I know that we all have the appeal and the charm of our downtown, and we love that charm. And just seeing how we can better move forward while still preserving the character of our small little beach community. So I appreciate the presentation tonight, and I look forward to more conversations upcoming.
All right, great. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem DeToy. A couple things from me. The first one is really overarching. I like the term you used, Martha, surgical amendments. And with regard to targeted or surgical amendments, are we looking to potentially, if all the conversations proceed and we like some things about these options, collectively support them or some of them, are we looking to potentially put some into play prior to a full zoning update, like we have, if you will, allowed for outdoor dining in the interim? Is that how we are to digest this in terms of potential timeline or availability to implement any of them? And if so, in what kind of timeline? If we know.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Martha. I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. I think you said surgical targeted is about doing something in the next 2 or 3 months. Without committing to timeframes, it's to really take some steps to put some of all this talk into action in terms of trying to create these investment opportunities and help our businesses turn the corner. One of the things we'll have to do in conjunction with some of these targeted zoning code updates is also code updates to deal with the dining situation out in the rights of way. And so that's another issue we plan to tackle in the short term. Because I think what a lot of people, the only thing they don't like about our temporary outdoor dining program, as we have said, is that it's temporary. So those will, we will try to track those in line with these, but it is a separate question in terms of how we use our rights of way for private purposes, which brings up a different set of issues and challenges.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you for that clarification. Much appreciated and some music to my ears. My next question has a reference on slide 8. I believe if I heard one of our callers, our first caller this evening, John David, he might have made a reference to this point, an option to consider citywide, allow a limited amount of additional square footage without requiring additional parking, for example, 10%. Unless I misheard him, he might have been suggesting we consider something above 10%, maybe 20%. So can I get any weighing in on that 10%, like how we're looking at that, why it's a good number, or is 20 scary? Can you give us some insight on that?
There's no magic to the number. It was just, something put out to start with. But, and I would kind of leave that to you if 20% or 30% or 15, some number. But the idea is to allow some limited amount per addition.
Yeah, and if I could,
just in
I would speak. I would speak to that too. I think some of the comments we heard earlier from committee member Hoffman, in terms of doing a little more inventory of what's out there that could help inform what might be a good number there.
All right, great. Sorry about the cacophony.
Yeah.
I'm without support. Any dog support. So I'm sorry. Were you done, Ken?
No, and I think it goes without saying. I think that, again, we're looking for just general direction from you all if that scale seems about right, or if it maybe doesn't seem quite right or quite bold enough, let us know.
Okay, great. Someone's knocking at my front door. I'll have to pause myself for a moment.
Are those Lady Gaga's dogs by any chance? You know what's going on here?
No.
Ms. Mayor, while you take care of the dogs, could I ask another question that was prompted by that last slide that I forgot to ask? What's the Coastal Commission going to say if we are proposing things that will reduce parking in the coastal zone? Do we have a sense of, is that going to be a barrier, and what's that going to do to any notion that we're going to get this done quickly, I'm wondering?
That's a great question. We are actually meeting internally to discuss that further. My understanding is that they've become more open to some of these kind of moderate iterative changes. And so how much time it will take, it could definitely affect the timeline in terms of getting these actually codified and effective immediately. But I don't know, Martha, you've worked with the Coastal Commission before too. What's your sense of how that's going to work?
It will be a conversation, and I think, and so as we move on with this, we might recommend some modifications, maybe even to what the Planning Commission and City Council ultimately, is on board with, if it means getting through the Coastal Commission. They tend not to show their cards early in the process. And so that's one reason why we're trying to do this in an expedited manner as well, in order to be able to start the conversations with them.
Well, one of the things that we've been talking about in the city for the 25 years plus that I've been involved is parking up at the community center, but presumably parking at the community center that would enable us to use Lot A more effectively than simply parking. What would happen? Is there any chance that Coastal would buy that? If we said, oh yeah, we're going to take away the city's second biggest public parking place in the beach zone, even though we're going to replace it, but it's outside the coastal zone, would that fly or not? Yeah.
That's part of that conversation, Martha.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But they do in our preferential parking district now. They do recognize what they call remote beach access parking.
Okay.
I'm sure they have a distinction though that very convenient beach parking is something they're not going to want to see reduced in any substantial way. And so, to the extent look at Lot 8. Is that an echo I'm getting?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit.
Yeah. To the extent we look at Lot A in some of our strategic discussions, which will actually come up later when we talk about our economic development strategy, I don't know, our assumption should probably always kind of stay with the fact that we don't want to decrease the amount of public parking in that location. However, we look at where we want to add parking supply, it would be a hard one to just not keep that same number of parking spaces, at least with my experience with Coastal Commission.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for giving me some cover. It was Frontier at my front door. Ken, I'm going to jump on that and ask a question about that. There has been fairly frequent reference to the structure down there, that it's empty a lot. And there's no, even as you say, that we, Coastal Commission would not look kindly on any public parking being removed. Could that be offset by studies that suggest that we have unused structure parking if it were studied in a way that would provide clarity about that? And I know that certainly it's not empty all summer or anything, but is it just...
Yeah, without it, again, that would be part of the conversation, but we did our own parking study before the pandemic, and it showed that our parking was utilized at a very high percentage during those peak summer months. So if you assume that we're going to kind of go back to that trend when we emerge from the pandemic, it would be a challenge to make that argument based on that data we gathered from just 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting because we're certainly getting a lot of input, increasing amounts of input about the future of driving.
Right.
And driving habits. So, you've got all these big entities. They all have they wield a big dragon tail in terms of making decisions. But I wonder sometimes if they're all sharing the same information at the same time, and often seem to me to be dealing with too much of the past information and not enough of what we see ahead. So that's unfortunate, especially given how long it takes to make these kinds of recommendations, to vet them in all ways that are important, and then to come to some decisions, which is why I'll throw this out here as I'm talking about it. I think I generally favor, and thank you, Martha, for clarifying that you didn't just look to our neighboring cities, which I think sometimes we overdo, or we tend to overdo at the exclusion of maybe looking more broadly at best practices that have worked in other places. So that was going to be a question I had anyway. So thank you for throwing that in, that we have maybe a combination of things that could potentially work in Hermosa Beach that are out there in the world of consideration, but that this one size fit all thing really has to go as fast as we can make it go, because it is literally one of the biggest pain points that we have in town. And for that reason and the others that I'm kind of outlining here, I tend to lean in the direction of doing the most we can while we're at it, and to not hesitate to think boldly, especially when we have experts bringing us recommendations that are based on sound information about what works and why it works. One of the concerns that I have that is growing is about this idea of mixed use that I know, I don't know all the intimate history, but I know that it was in the conversation off and on for 4 years while Plan Hermosa was coming together. And the reason it's not allowed, correct me if I'm wrong, is because the community had a pretty strong disinclination to allow height limits to go any further, which would really make this much more of a viable plan, if you will, to grow our downtown and our commercial footprint. But am I remembering that right, Ken? Or Peter or David? Oh, sorry, Ken, you're muted.
Let's defer to Ken.
Ken, you're on mute.
Ken, you're muted.
We're not part of that conversation.
You guys can't read my mouth. With the height limits, it's more than a disinclination in the sense that we actually have some voter initiatives that have established some of our height limits. So that's a real challenge. But I think the main reason for the, I guess I'd characterize it as not pursuing the more transformational mixed use concepts is the feeling like that the residential market is already so strong. We already have a horizontally mixed use community. And so that there is a feeling we don't want the residential eroding our commercial capacities. So that was why it was not embraced. It doesn't mean, we can't consider it in a form that really addresses a way to limit it in the appropriate locations so it doesn't somehow erode our commercial capacity, which we are always concerned with. That speaks to the vibrancy of our commercial areas, as well as to the city's tax base. So it's I think that's part of it.
Okay, that's actually really helpful. I mean, what I was going to say about it is, and I don't know where I stand on it, but I think that I do think that it needs to come back into the conversation at this point for several reasons, because we've got this pressure on housing capacity and the housing element, and we don't know how that's all going to shake out. But I also recall from some of those conversations around Plan Hermosa about how much it might limit us as a city in our commercial districts from being so unmovable around some of these concepts. So I think as a point in time, there's been several more years that have passed that to understand kind of what the trade-offs are will be important. I understand that it would be revisiting Plan Hermosa, and that's a big deal, but it sure gets brought up a lot when people who know the most about these kinds of topics take a look at our equation and imagine what's possible. So, and maybe it's, differentially possible. I don't know. So I said that, let's see. Oh, I guess I'll just say that I certainly don't see any obvious reason why people who are doing outdoor dining, as they are now, shouldn't be allowed to have table service and serve their menus the way they exist inside. Certainly need to be enforced for following all the rest of the rules, whatever those are. But anyway, I just want to close my comments by thanking the staff and our partners, strategic partners, and my colleagues for for helping to bring this conversation about. And it's really awesome that we're here, as somebody said earlier, that we're actually talking real recommendations. So very, very excited about that. Thank you. Thank you all. Anything else before we? Okay, I have that we are moving straight to the next presentation, correct?
So, good evening, Chair and members of the Economic Development Committee. I'm pleased today to present the Economic and Market Study Preliminary Report. As we've reported to the committee, we have engaged Economic and Planning Systems to help us in providing an economic and market study that we can use as we move forward with our economic development strategy. And as we move forward, before we do a focused update of the downtown revitalization study. So tonight, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Jim Musbach and Jake Craner, even though it looks like it's Jake Craner on both of those windows. But I'd like to introduce you to our consultants. We're going to provide a preliminary report on their findings, and we are hoping to receive some feedback from members of the committee and members of the public as appropriate. We don't have a public comment section there, but we are hoping for feedback. And this piggybacks very well on our discussion on the zoning. Especially talking about the targeted parking, which we also discussed with the stakeholders group at our last meeting on February 17th. So at this time, I'd like to introduce you to Jim Musbach and Jake Craner, and we'll receive their presentation.
Thank you, Christy. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Musbach, in spite of the label that's there, and that's because Jake lent me his link to get on here because I was having trouble finding it in my calendar. But we were hired at Economic and Planning Systems. I was involved with the Aroma Design team that did the downtown study and economic development study in 2014. And so we recently were brought on to update that economic development study. And so what we've done is a combination of things, all the things that we could get through data sources, things of that nature on the market and demographics and household incomes and so on and so forth have been updated, and they will be updated in the tables and the text of the original report. Much of the other work that we've done, we've relied on a cross-section of community members, business owners, brokers, other knowledgeable parties in the city to get a better sense of kind of what's really going on. And we're doing this in the middle of the COVID shutdown, so it's very difficult. And when we did this the first time, we did a lot of shoe leather work of just observing the mix of businesses and what was going on in them and talking to the business owners and so on. A lot of those businesses are either closed or operating at reduced levels or apparently closed. And actually, we're finding that a lot of them are just preparing to come out later when the COVID-19 crisis is somewhat over. So a lot of the things that we recommend the first time are still valid. But we did find some things that have really kind of shifted and changed in a significant way. And it's perfect segue from the prior presentation because we put parking up there high on the list of things that should be considered. And Boris Dramov, who's the Roma Design principal, one of them, told me years ago, much to my surprise, that 80% of urban design is parking. Which I thought was a denigration of the artistic quality of the work that he was doing. But it is true, parking has a big impact on the form and function of cities and downtowns. And so there's a lot of things there that are shifting that are worth noting and as you go forward, and much of which has been talked about in the prior presentation. The other thing is a couple of big trends. This, partly as a result of, maybe largely as a result of COVID-19, so many people are working from home now. And what many people are finding, and this is true, I think, in our business and lots of other businesses, is that working from home actually works pretty well. And there are lots of reasons why people would like to work, at least within their communities, if not in their homes all the time. And that opens up some great opportunities, we think, in terms of economic development that we'd like to discuss a little bit. The other thing is that, just the evolution of the business mix. We've seen changes down there. Again, it's a little bit harder to assess with the status of COVID, but there have been some changes there and some things that suggest themselves that might be really beneficial in terms of, economic development strategies to be applied not only in downtown, but elsewhere in the city also. And the other big thing that's changed is that the city is taking a much more proactive approach to economic development, with us having an economic development committee and having Christy as a business liaison and that kind of thing. And, looking like there could be some revivification, if you will, of the Chamber of Commerce and things of that nature. That I think we've found from all the people we talked to that they're actually very heartened by that. And, that there's a recognition that the city is really being more mindful about the business climate and, what they can do to help businesses succeed and for the downtown and other parts of the city to thrive. So we don't have a PowerPoint because we really wanted to just try to get all this down on paper, so give it to you for this meeting. And there's a lot of material here. But what I'd like to do is have Jake kind of just go through the data stuff that we've updated on the market and community demographics and things like that. And then I will walk you through some of the other observations that we gleaned from our interviews and observations that have to do with some of these other things that have changed significantly over the last 6 or so years and have implications for how you might want to think about and proceed on an economic development strategy. So Jake, if you would take over on that part of it, that would be terrific.
All right. Sorry?
So
Yes.
will the real Jake Trainer please step forward?
You stole my line. I was going to use that one, but good evening, everyone.
Young handsome one. Take over now.
Good evening, everyone. I am the real Jake Craner. So for this element of the assignment, as Jen mentioned, we updated the data points from our 2014 report with the most recently available public data. And this was done to both identify trends that have taken place in the intermittent period, as well as to expand the geographic scope, as the previous report focused mostly on downtown. So this go around, we wanted to take a look at the city as a whole. I know many of you have seen our summary, so I'll try and stick to some of the more salient findings. For socioeconomic and demographic trends, the city has seen a pretty low growth rate over the past decade. It's still just a titch below 20,000 people, so it's the smallest of the beach cities. However, residential growth has actually declined in the last 10 years by about 2.5%. So this indicates that household sizes are increasing, more families are moving into the city. Hermosa Beach, according to data released in Q3 of 2020, now has a median home value of 1.7 million, which is a 72% increase from 2010. This is still below Manhattan Beach, but quite a bit higher than Redondo and nearly 3 times higher than the city of Los Angeles as a whole. Median incomes have increased drastically in Hermosa Beach, up nearly 40% above 2010 to $137,000 per household. To put this in perspective, Manhattan Beach, which is still has the highest median income household of the beach cities, only grew at about 14% over the same time period. The residential mix is predominantly single family homes, and you're getting more of them by the year, with multifamily actually seeing a decline in total units. So, and then average age, I know as was mentioned earlier on the call, it has increased a few years up to 39, but that's still the youngest among the beach cities. So for employment, this data comes from LEHD, which lags by 2 years or so. So this is mostly 2018 data, unfortunately. But between 2010 and 2018, the city saw a 9% increase in jobs within the city. So that far outpaces residential growth. While tourism, dining, and entertainment are still account for the largest share of jobs within the city at about a quarter, the share of jobs within these sectors are actually declining, with knowledge jobs in areas such as finance, real estate, IT, and other professional services are increasing, and they now have a share of about 20%. This is still a fair amount below Manhattan Beach, which has knowledge sector jobs accounting for around a third of total employment. However, despite the high growth of jobs relative to population in Hermosa Beach, as of 2018, the city still had a jobs to household ratio of about 0.7 and a net commuter outflow of about 2,500. However, this is bound to change quite a bit as a result of COVID-19. With, like Jim was saying, a number of people now realize that it's just fine to work from home. So the number of out commuters is bound to decline. The retail market, there is about 3.7 million square feet of destination retail within about 10 miles of Hermosa Beach, which is actually a decline from 5 years ago as a result of a few larger centers closing. Retail rents in Hermosa Beach are pretty much smack dab in between Manhattan and Redondo at about $3.50 per square foot. However, Hermosa does have the highest retail vacancy among the beach cities at 6.1%. That's as of Q4 2020. So for taxable retail sales per square foot, Hermosa Beach is about 12,200 per capita, which is higher than Redondo, which is about 11,200 per capita, but significantly lower than Manhattan Beach at 19,200 per capita. Within Hermosa Beach, this was primarily driven by food and drinking places sales. I believe that was about 5,000 per capita. Areas where Hermosa Beach really lags behind these other two beach cities are in general retail, as well as clothing and clothing accessories. On to the hotel market. Hermosa Beach has a little under 500 total hotel rooms as of earlier this year, which is proportionately lower than you would expect compared to Manhattan Beach and Redondo Beach. I guess the newest hotel is H2O, which is a 30-room hotel on Hermosa Avenue, which opened late last year. And then for the office market, Hermosa Beach is quite small compared to both Manhattan and Redondo, with under 400,000 square feet of office space, less than a quarter of Manhattan, which is even lower than Redondo, which is at 2.4 million. Pretty much all of the space is being C office space, and rents are again between Manhattan Beach and Redondo Beach at $3.75 per square foot. And again, with office space, Hermosa does see the highest vacancy rate as of Q4 with just under 12%. Since our last report, some of the major developments in the office market are Marlin Equities expanding its office presence along Pier Avenue, as well as Baker and Burton Lundy, also expanding their presence on Upper Pier. And then I believe ground is broken on an expansion of Skechers' global headquarters. So that's a brief summary of the data that we looked at, and I'm going to pass it back to Jim to go into a little more depth on key trends.
Does anybody want to ask any questions about this segment, or should we just keep on rolling?
Any questions right now? I have one, if I could ask. We hear so much about the trend of work from home and post-pandemic, and you hear a lot of like it's bound to continue and be a strong trend. Is that based on actual data and surveying out there, or is it too early for that? I mean, I think it sounds pretty sound. Like, in other words, even if people went back to the office half the time and they stayed home half the time, that's still a massive change in, kind of people hanging around in town as opposed to leaving every day. But where's all the speculation emerging from?
Yeah, I can answer that. We have, my company, EPS, we have actually been studying from early on in the pandemic and the shutdown, what the implications are on the long term. And this is something there's a lot of evidence for all over the country, really. And, California and the Bay Area specifically too. Tech companies, Twitter has just said we can work, people can work from home indefinitely. Facebook, same thing. Google, et cetera, et cetera. But the other aspect of this is that, in an LA metro area, mobility is an issue. Commuting is no fun. So you're getting a higher, kind of level of executive types and entrepreneurs that are kind of moving into the city who would love to be working closer to their community and can. So there is a lot of evidence out there that this is really an ongoing trend. But we'll talk about this a little bit later. But having some adjunct to that allows people to work at least some of the time in an office where they have certain kinds of facilities or machines or whatever that they don't have in their home office, but also the ability to not be distracted by household matters, kids and dogs and things like that in some cases, or meet with clients, whatever, could actually help facilitate that work from home. And just the characteristics of the beach communities of just being really desirable and pleasant places to be. If you look at it in the context of the overall metro market, the more that people can live in these communities and continue to do their work without having to commute every day, it's considered to be a great advantage. So we think it's here to stay. It's enforced in a way right now because people mostly aren't going to their offices, and you'll see some of that change. But this is something that we think is going to be a long-term trend.
And there has been some surveys conducted by some of the major real estate brokerage companies, Cushman & Wakefield, CBRE, as well as read a McKinsey report recently as well that I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but they survey office workers as well as major employers, and there's a good deal of indication that this trend will continue in some form or another.
Yeah, I mean, there's no putting that genie all the way back in the bottle, let's face it.
Right.
And that's very helpful because I know it's still early in, kind of experiencing this past year, which is like this massive experiment or forced experiment. But I think it's just very, very significant inside of this discussion. I had another question about the retail vacancy being, significantly higher here compared to our neighbors. I don't know if that's fluke or if that was the case back in 2014, if we remember, or if there's more to the story that we know.
Well, over the past, I'm just pulling up the chart here. So presently, Hermosa Beach is 6.1, Redondo is at 4.1, and Manhattan Beach is at 1.8. Over the last 10 years, they've all experienced some time being either the most or least vacant retailing center. So it's tough to say what's going to happen going forward. But as recently as 2014, Hermosa had the lowest retail vacancy rate.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's kind of an oddity in a way because the rents are lower, but the vacancies are also higher. So it's not necessarily a value proposition. But storefront retail generally across the country, even like New York City and Madison Avenue, is experiencing a transition. There's just not as much of that. This is being done that way. In some cases, they're kind of demonstration stores, but it's mostly still online. And some of the people we've talked to in Hermosa Beach that have been kind of surviving through COVID have really ramped up their online sales. So we're, as a firm and as urban professionals, looking to see what happens with storefront retail, and we don't see it shifted to things that don't generate activity on the street, but you don't want them to be blank spaces either. So we did find some of the vacancies, or we're told by people who know that Hermosa has right now actually are remodeling and retooling and preparing to reopen when COVID subsides. So that may be a trend that is going to improve just as the conditions improve.
Yeah, it's one of those where you often hear kind of almost like a habit. We got to preserve retail space, and we do to whatever degree. But I think this is another really significant trend that's been exacerbated. It existed already. Now it's exacerbated by people staying at home and shopping in different ways. But and it just causes me to think we may need to turn our attention to this like office space, kind of ramping that up or something. But all right, that's all I had right now. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. With all this data, are you looking at apples and apples in Manhattan Beach's downtown, or Manhattan Beach as a whole, including the mall and all the other areas that they have? And run down to the same question. Are the sample, not sample size, because our true numbers or units are quite less compared to the other cities, but they have, a much broader diversification of retail space from the mall to, downtown to other areas like that. So I just didn't know how these numbers were pulled.
Yeah, so the numbers I just gave were citywide, but in the report we've continued looking at the downtown core areas of each of the beach cities as well. So once the report's complete, we'll have more granularized data on that front as well.
Awesome, thank you, Madam Chair.
Dave.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the info, and I know we're only halfway there, but I did want to weigh in with a couple questions. Where you talk about population, income, and housing, the last bullet talks about the trend toward replacing older multifamily dwelling with larger, expensive single-family homes. I mean, specific to the state law today, and Ken can correct me, but I mean, there are limits in terms of reducing residential units. So I don't know if this is just an executive summary, but that trend is going to be blunted by, some of the, restrictions by the state in terms of what can and can't be done due to the housing shortage and its perception through Sacramento. Question on employment. The top of page 2, you referenced the LEHD. For those that are not in this every day, what does LEHD stand for?
That's the Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics Survey, which is conducted by the U.S. Census.
Oh, that. Okay. If you could put that in there, because I was like, is that LA? Or if you could reference that once before abbreviating, that would be helpful. And I am curious about when we've looked at the numbers, and specific to the numbers referenced in Plan Hermosa, that 95% of the jobs are outside of the city or some variant of that. Does that true up, or maybe you want to check that relative to the 2475, or I don't know where our information was for the Plan Hermosa. But I know we generally talk about the fact that 90% of the people that make a buck have to leave the city limits to do so. So anyway, just FYI.
Yeah. So with that net outflow, that's number of out commuters to that 90% you just referenced, and then subtracting those who commute in to town.
Okay. So they're being offset by the numbers of probably predominantly food and beverage workers that are driving in. Okay, fair enough.
Exactly.
My bad. And then specific to the retail, not a question, but a comment. To the extent that we could break out, say, for Redondo Beach, North Redondo versus Riviera Village. I know there's a lot of conversation about how the downtown core looks compared to Riviera Village. That would be great. And then just the one other comment I have so far in this section. I mean, I have a rough idea, but can you define how the classifications of office space class A versus B versus C, how is that market cut up, and what are the differentiators between an A, B, and C, either quantitative or qualitative?
So this data comes from CoStar, and they've got their own criteria for classifying office space. A is generally newer with more amenities. Jim, I don't know if you have any additional comments to put in there.
Yeah, it's been used for a long time, and Class A is usually relatively new space and kind of most modern configurations and parking and landscaping and things like that, and will command the highest rents. And B and C is often older offices, different levels of improvements or renovation to them between B and C. But this is something else we'll talk about a bit later, and it even relates to the out-commuting thing, is that, several people really thought that Hermosa could support more Class A office space because what Class A users are looking for, in addition to quality space, is services, quality of life, restaurants and things like that, which Hermosa has a lot to offer. And again, that sector is quite a bit smaller than it is in the neighboring beach communities. So there's certainly some potential for that.
Okay. Yeah, no doubt. I apologize if I put you guys on the spot, but as we get to the final report, if we could define that, I mean, I certainly think of Class A as like, Rosecrans Corridor, et cetera, right? New, big. But if we could kind of define that and, to the extent that, B or C could be upgraded to A, or what is that even practical or possible in our downtown versus, say, PCH corridor? I appreciate it, just for the sake of clarity and making sure that everybody understands your good work. Madam Mayor, that's all I have for now. I appreciate. I'll have some questions and comments when we start in key trends, but I'll defer at this point.
Thank you. I'm just a council member these days, Dave. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, emeritus. Once a mayor, always a mayor.
Yes, former.
Yes.
Pete, did you have anything, or should we? Okay, well, let's go on to the last couple sections. Thanks for offering us a chance to comment.
Sure, and we can stop after these other ones as well. And it's no coincidence that we put parking up front in these key issues. And I won't belabor this too much, because I think you had a really good report from the prior consultants that have really been studying this and who are transportation specialists, and we're not. But we deal with parking all the time in various ways, and we got a lot of information from people we talk to. And it's typically for what we would call revitalization studies or economic development studies for smaller or older downtowns, almost invariably over the last since I've been doing this, which is a long time, merchants are always complaining that there's not enough parking. We didn't hear one single person say that in this study. And if anything, the key thing that was coming out is that the parking requirements that the city has are actually an impediment to some of the things that you really would like to do. And so, modifying some of those parking standards to make it easier to re-tenant and refurbish some of the older buildings, and to facilitate some of the newer development that were, on-site parking is just not feasible economically, and finding some solution for it would be helpful. And in our last effort on this, we talked about centralized parking, and you're collecting the in-lieu fee to do that. But I think the perception about where that parking should be and the nature of it has changed so much. I'll get into it in a minute. But one thing that was really interesting and understandable is that restaurants in particular seemed, restaurant owners and operators particularly not concerned about parking, because so many of their customers are coming by ride share, even bicycling, walking from around the surrounding neighborhoods and so on and so forth. So there are alternatives to that. And I think as the city kind of shifts more towards kind of chef-driven restaurants and, kind of higher caliber restaurants and things like that, that's well served by those kinds of things. So the parking requirements for those who are perceived are less than they used to be. One of the things people pointed out, though, is that employee parking takes up a lot of what could be customer or visitor parking. And so this kind of ties back into some offsite solution that could get the parking, some of the employee parking out of the downtown, and free up some of the street parking and the existing parking down there for customers and visitors. The thing that kept coming up around that, and this was discussed several years ago, and I think it's been brought up again, is that the tennis courts at the Civic Center or Community Center would be kind of an ideal place for a number of reasons. One is that it would provide overflow and peak parking where you don't really have capacity downtown now. It would also could be an alternative to developing parking on Lot A or keeping the surface parking on Lot A and 11th to 12th Street, which a lot of people suggested was just too valuable of a property to devote strictly to parking, because it could tie together Hermosa Avenue and the Strand and be some kind of really great sort of mixed use type of project. And the other thing about having the offsite parking up the hill and pier is that people who are parking, and it's not that long of a walk, they're going to come walking down through your commercial district. And so you're going to get a lot more foot traffic going by your businesses than you would with a structured parking that's right next to the beach. That's something that's actually worked pretty well for Manhattan Beach, because they do get, their parking's up the hill a bit, and there's a lot of people filter through their downtown, so they get a lot of exposure to that. Someone raised earlier the Coastal Commission, and they're tough. I don't know what their position on that would be. It seems like that as long as you're providing access and facilitating the enjoyment of the coast and not blocking it off with something that doesn't really support that. And I'm getting out of into speculation here, but that's something that would be worth taking on, I think. One of the big recommendations that we made last time or things that we really supported in our finding, was that the kind of destination hotel on the former Mermaid site there at the corner of the Strand and the Plaza. And we weren't able to contact the actual sponsors of that proposed project. They did a lot of design work, obviously. It was actually like a really very nice project. And the general consensus, and having done a lot of financial performance, I would tend to agree, is that the on-site parking requirement there with underground parking was just financially infeasible. Now, I don't know if there are other reasons why the project didn't go forward, but that's a really tough one to overcome, and for even a successful hotel and restaurant to support that kind of parking. And even structured parking would be really difficult, but parking below grade, right next to the beach is a very expensive proposition, obviously. And I think your transportation consultants got into this somewhat, but some of these parking issues can be ameliorated with transportation demand management strategies of various kinds, some shuttles and, off-site parking and you've already kind of restriped the streets to make bicycling much more possible. There's e-bikes now that people are using to really expand the range and kind of flatten the hills, if you will. So these kinds of things are really changing kind of the demand for parking. And, all over the place. And it's a good alternative, much lower cost, and it removes some of that financial burden of providing that kind of parking. Some people mentioned, and I think this is a really good point, that to the extent that new projects or newly renovated projects don't have to provide this parking and then amortize it out of the revenues from their project, they can actually charge lower rents and still have a successful project. So that cost gets passed on to the extent that it can be, and in some cases it can't be, and the project won't happen. But that is one thing that can be done. The current garage, it's kind of mixed feelings about that. It's certainly serving the beach hotel well, and people use it. It's vacant, or not vacant, but it's underutilized a lot of the time. And a lot of people felt that having a big parking structure that close to the beach again is something you don't necessarily want to repeat in another spot because it takes up such valuable real estate. So that's our take on the parking part of that. We've already talked a lot about parking. If anybody has any questions on that, we can keep going. Okay. The next thing we want to talk about is the business and land use mix. And we threw those two things together. And again, we'll sort this out and kind of, be a little stronger or clear about sort of the takeaways on this. But there's a lot of different pieces of this. And several people mentioned that it would be great to have some kind of a community survey. And I think the Chamber of Commerce is actually trying to sponsor one to find out more what the local population would like to see in their downtowns. And sometimes that's what they like to see is not something that somebody's going to deliver to them, but sometimes it is. So it would be interesting to see what people say about that. One other thing that we've noted is that the externalities, if you will, of the late night drinking crowd have diminished a fair amount from what they were, 6 or 7 years ago. I understand that there still are some issues around that with late night police and EMT calls and things like that, but it's definitely diminished some, and it's partly because of the CUPs that the city has implemented on those, and people tend to complain about those, but they seem to have been effective in that regard. And a lot of people would like to see, continued evolution more towards, culinary kind of chef driven restaurants and things like that would bring in a crowd that isn't going to be out at 2 a.m, doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But all by the same token, it was noted by some of the brokers that some of the bar restaurants on the plaza in particular really rely on that kind of late night crowd as part of their revenue stream to kind of, keep their head above water. I don't know. We don't have any independent data to verify that, but it was noted that even the change from a 2 o'clock to a 1 o'clock closure for some people kind of put them under some financial pressure. But I think that's a trade-off that seems to have worked out well in terms of ameliorating some of those other kinds of problems. One of the other key points is that outdoor dining. I think there was just universally stated of the people that we spoke to that, and I think it was echoed earlier in the parking study, that people would like to see it continue. And, when you think about, the weather and the character of the downtown and all the things that it's got going for it, it's always been kind of amazing that there hasn't been more outdoor dining in Southern California generally, and certainly in the beach communities. And we're finding that in other places too, like even the Bay Area, where all these parklets have sprung up to people just trying to survive through COVID, and they've created kind of a lively street scene. And you certainly see this in Europe and other places in Asia when you go around. So that's something that it adds a lot of vitality to the community, and in some form or another, people would like to see that continue. The work from home thing, this sort of ties into a number of things. One is people working from home do provide more market support for restaurants and businesses in the community that they would utilize, that they wouldn't be utilizing if they were driving to Culver City or someplace to go to work. And we do think that this co-working space is actually a great adjunct to that. And there's one that we know of in Hermosa and Unida on Hermosa Avenue, but there are actually quite a number of them in Manhattan Beach. And they are things that could be done in sort of mixed use format with 2 or 3 story buildings with ground floor commercial, smaller scale, but just give people the option to be able to work in an office if they choose, and not solely work from their home office or their bedroom or whatever it may be. One of the things we found, or were told by people who actually know what's going on kind of behind the scenes on some of these things, is a lot of the businesses that appear to be closed right now, that are just kind of papered over, actually are just remodeling, and they have plans to come in with some sort of new concepts and to open up, when the COVID restrictions are reduced. So it looks like, when you put together all the demographics of the city, this trend towards work at home, the ability to, have outdoor dining and a lot of the other things that are happening, it looks like the downtown is poised to come out of this COVID restriction in a very, very positive way. One of the issues that came up and was raised by a number of people is that, the future of the Comedy and Magic Club. And we had some conversation with the owner there, who has a long history of concerns about things that he articulated very clearly, or at least at length. And it is a great institution, and it's something that's a real asset to the downtown. Has a great reputation. A lot of people, got their start there. They have a lot of affection for it. So it's certainly something that if the city can help in any way to retain it, it would be a great benefit to the town. And likewise, maybe other smaller entertainment venues, or just even, the ability to do live music and bars and things like that, that were not so just alcohol oriented, but more entertainment oriented, would be nice additions to the town as well. One thing that's really clearly missing from downtown is residential. And, this has been an ongoing trend for a long time to introduce residential into commercial districts, to bring in, more rooftops to support the local businesses, more street activity, just to provide a more vibrant mix of the downtown. And this is the kind of thing that could be, again, supported on a fairly small scale, not high rises or anything like that, but 2-3 story buildings that could have ground floor commercial, mixed with residential, in infill lots in the downtown area. And, maybe that's some, if lot A turns out not to be a parking lot, some portion of that might be a place where some of that could happen. And there are other places that are kind of underutilized where this kind of infill development could actually be good. And we've seen this happen in lots of other smaller downtowns where it's really created a lot more vitality for the downtown. So that's the end of that section on the mix. If everyone wants to stop and discuss any of that or carry on.
Questions? How about maybe just a couple of quick comments. I don't know if staff knows, but with regard to the Mermaid property and the proposed hotel that was sort of well underway to be considered, and the parking challenge, do we have any, can we parse out, what I remember is how expensive that frozen wall part of that underground parking was going to be, and how prohibitive cost-wise that would be. Given all the conversation about parking, would actual required parking potentially shift for a property like that under the current conversations that we're having, or not so much at a location like that if it were to become an actual hotel at some point? Could parking requirements be lowered for something like a small hotel there inside of these conversations, or is that sort of a whole different animal?
Well, it seems like this is the kind of thing that could be addressed to a large extent with, valet parking, off-site parking, vans, et cetera, et cetera. It's, not going to be wouldn't be a huge project. But there are other solutions, particularly if you have adequate offsite parking. The valet parking can work really well. We've seen this happen in other downtown areas like Denver Union Station in Denver, where there's no parking, converted an old rail terminal into a hotel that's been very successful, and all the parking is done through valet parking, and it's worked out really well. So there are solutions, to get people where they want to go.
Great, thanks for that. Pete, do you have something on that?
I do, if I could, please. To follow up, and I think I was going to say Jim and Jake probably heard the earlier conversation we had about the mixed use issue. And we did go through that at great length in Hermosa when we did plan Hermosa. And my concern is, to reiterate again the point I tried to make before, I have no question that if we were to allow mixed use in the sense of residential over commercial in downtown Hermosa, that it would stimulate a tremendous redevelopment of downtown. And that tremendous redevelopment would have virtually no impact on the amount of available commercial space. It would bring in whatever it is, 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, whatever it is, new residential units. And I'm not sure what that solves in Hermosa. I mean, and you guys know better than I, the whole concept of new urbanism is to create a community like Hermosa Beach. And it makes sense if we're talking about downtown, I don't know, Fullerton, downtown Orange, downtown, those kinds of remnant places that are surrounded by the classic suburban sprawl. But in a city that's as dense as Hermosa Beach, there isn't a building downtown that's 100 feet from the nearest residential development. And to put a layer of 20 more units there, which aren't going to, by the way, help us in our affordability housing issue, and that's where the problem is, because no one would be incentivized to build that stuff if they knew it couldn't be at market rate. And I'm struggling again, and you heard probably in the previous conversation that the plan as we adopted it did not anticipate that we would be seeking mixed use. And our experience in town, in part, where we did allow it, did exactly what I'm suggesting. It led to redevelopment that led to expensive residential condominiums over underutilized commercial spaces. Help me, Jim, understand why we should be entertaining residential development in a community that already, especially if I'm being told that there's an opportunity for more of the kind of, talk about Class A. I'm assuming Class A office space would include Marlin Equity, would include Skechers headquarters, would include the new building that's going down there. I apologize, I don't know what the address is, but the building where the chamber used to be that's going to be redeveloped again as a corporate headquarters, or at least a company headquarters. I think the trend is that way. I would hate to preclude that by seeing everything converted to residential in the interim, if that kind of mixed use was permitted.
Well, I guess I would say that, a lot of traditional downtowns, even Hermosa, I'm going to go here. I'm not sure why. Buildings were built back in the 20s and 30s a lot of them did have mixed use in them. So they were kind of a traditional part of downtowns. And this isn't something that would necessarily be, as you mentioned, we were talking 40, 50 units. It's just one more piece of the puzzle down there that kind of can add some additional spending potential and some, vibrancy to the downtown. So I know that would just displace anything else. And the Class A businesses, there are reasons why people would want to do Class A in the town because it's a very desirable place, but it'll be a very small scale. So even the mixed use doesn't even have to be residential. It could also be these co-working spaces or Class A office spaces. So it's just a matter of adding a little bit of vibrancy and diversity and density to your downtown.
And also, if I can add one thing, something that we did hear a few times were these live-work lofts, which could combine those two uses into one and capture both those sources of demand.
That it, Peter?
Yeah, I apologize, but I guess I'm not making myself clear. All of that would come, though, at the expense of the potential of that Class A office building. In other words, if I owned, I don't know, pick the building that El Tarasco went into. If I could tear that building down, retain the ground floor commercial, but put a condominium above it, that's what I'm going to do tomorrow. You guys just said, what is it? 1.7 million is the mean property value in town. There's no incentive for me as the developer to convert that into some kind of office that may or may not be, that I may not get a return on when I know I'll get returned tomorrow. The real estate market is so hot in the beach communities that every time we convert potential commercial to residential, we're diminishing the opportunities for economic development. And again, don't misunderstand. Obviously, it benefits the real estate and construction industry. I don't think that's what our goal is in the Economic Development Committee, though.
Yeah, well, that's just that we would presume to make, but Class A office space. I don't know what that is. Might be more appropriate up on PCH because of the scale and kind of you do have parking requirements with Class A office space that you wouldn't have with smaller scale infill development in downtown for these other kinds of uses. And you wouldn't want to put a 5-story Class A office building in your downtown because it'd be really kind of a jarring departure from the character and the scale of the downtown, I would think, but that's my opinion.
Again, Jim, I think I was misunderstood. No, I'm saying that we have Class A office space downtown, that clearly there is an incentive to locate here, as you guys suggested, and that Marlin Equity is an example of how that would develop here as a sort of organic thing if that site is available, but not if that site's already been converted to a condominium.
Yeah, I think you have all your infill sites converted to condos. There's some possibility some of that, some of these other things as well.
Sorry about the echo. I see that Suja, our city manager, has her hand up. Suja, you want to weigh in?
I do, and thank you. And I appreciate the conversation with Commissioner Hoffman and the questions. I do think I understand where you're coming from and the risk that you foresee in allowing mixed use to include residential as part of the mix. I would ask us to consider that this is not an all or nothing proposition. I'm not familiar with a downtown that is a successful downtown that is just purely commercial. Anywhere I've traveled, whether it's here in the United States or just purely commercial. And don't mean to have you roll your eyes, Commissioner Hoffman. I'm not looking to frustrate you. I realize that you have academic expertise, and which we really, really cherish and value. But I think there's also an opportunity to perhaps consider that a different mix is necessary. If everything were fine as it is, we would not have an economic development committee. And I think an economic development committee can't be solely focused on the commercial aspects of it, whether it's office, Class A. And I think the last 12 months at least have shown us that there may not be as much demand for office space as we previously thought. Perhaps more folks would like to stay working from home, and I think we see that as a reality. And so the percentage that we have cited in Plan Hermosa as the percentage of employment that's outside of our city, I don't know that that remains the same as we come out of this pandemic. And so to be prepared for that reality is important. To have a little bit more diversity in the downtown of uses, I would submit is important. And really, I think Jim articulated with one simple word, it's the vitality of it. There's a different vitality when you do have rooftops in a downtown where people are invested where they are. It doesn't mean that we need to replace what's already a successful Class A office space. So those are, it's my feedback. I certainly, as an urban planner myself, have my own experience and orientation and see where it does work. I will share with you that in the downtowns that I've worked in, it really is the vitality of a neighborhood. When you add a neighborhood feel to a downtown environment, that brings that everyday live, work, life experience. And yes, you're right. We are a dense city all across Hermosa. So we don't struggle with the issues that other cities do where there is a suburban element to it. But again, if we didn't have an issue that needed this sort of workshopping, then I don't know that this committee would have been formed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. Anything else on that? If not, I'll add a couple things that are related, and thank you for your comments as well, Suja. So I just wanted to say that it's been a couple years now, but I've been in a few conversations where people who ideate what can be done in different areas have suggested when it comes to that 10th Street parking lot in that area, which includes Scotty's and 10th Street, that it need not necessarily be considered one or the other, either parking or commercial, but it could have maybe some development on the bottom with parking retained, maybe above. I don't know if that's ever been seriously considered, but I do agree with Madam City Manager about thinking outside of the box. It actually very much resonated with me, this concept of vitality. And I actually have a lot of conversations with people around town, including business owners, but not just business owners, that they may not use that word, but they're describing it. They're saying we need to make our downtown more interesting. And in fact, it struck me when I read about utilizing rooftops more potentially. We have some of the best rooftops anywhere in the world, probably. And the few places that there are, a lot of homes have them, residences have them. You see people on them all the time in residential areas, and I can imagine, spotty rooftop activity here and there being interesting, as well as something we haven't touched on, but I know is referenced in here, and that is more live entertainment of different types, music, small scale music, not DJs, but small acoustic acts, maybe some other kinds of poetry. Who knows? There's a lot of options there, but these create interesting places for people to come by and hang out and grab their coffee or their food and sit and gather. I very much like the idea of thinking about all of our options and trying to imagine how we could create this placemaking that everybody keeps talking about, that I think we feel like we have great places, but I think that a lot of people feel like we are underselling our placemaking, and there's a lot more that we could do around that. So I like that we're in the conversation very much. And the co-work space, I know, took a hit because of COVID, because it was shared workspace. But with vaccines coming online and a lot of people wanting to minimize their business leases, office leases. If there are a lot of these in Manhattan, particularly up on Rosecrans, and we should watch those and see how in demand they are, because that is a great use. And it's not residential, it's people coming in the daytime to those locations in the downtown, right next to all of our commercial areas. Like Sue just said, it's not an all or nothing, but maybe the nuances here are what could really benefit us, especially. And that's all I wanted to add on that. Yes, Dave.
Yes, thank you. Great discussion here. And I'll probably kind of come somewhere in the middle, and I had a lot of great ideas here that we're kicking out. I just want to comment, there was back to parking, there was a comment that said it's generally agreed that onerous parking requirements made the Mermaid site tough. That would imply that city staff and Ken's staff was unreasonable in their requirement, and I've not found that to be the case. But I do think certainly the combination of existing parking requirements with the site itself and the frozen sand concept was tough, no doubt there. But when I saw the word onerous, I sort of react a little bit to that. I do think to the comment of second floor, especially on upper pier, at least in my mind, I think extended work from home is going to be something that happens. I also think that as people hunker down and do that on a longer term basis, especially with kids at home, the amount of square footage you need increases. So that's why I think co-working is something that could develop along there. Picture at 2,000 square feet for a family of four may be enough space. 2,000 square feet with 2 adults working at home and 2 kids, homeschooling. That's a whole different animal. It doesn't feel quite as big. So there have been moments, I'll admit, that I've thought about co-working. So I do think that's something that needs to be considered. And, we use this word vibrancy, vitality a lot of different ways. I think Mayor Campbell, I hope Justin's not listening, Chair Campbell commented on, I think there's a lot of ways with placemaking. I've talked to at least one city council candidate about that. Picture a Hermosa where we had, sort of curated street musicians. I think we had discussed that in an earlier meeting, and Madam City Manager is looking at that. If we had street musicians, and I'll just arbitrarily say, not to pick on one, but let's say one of the banks that anchored Pier Plaza was instead, say, a Warby Parker, where a lot of people are coming in and out. And I've heard that concept mentioned from one of our business owners. Downtown would be a heck of a lot more vital, and we haven't changed zoning, we haven't changed parking, anything. So I think there's a mix of programming and especially, placemaking, which is looking at, all age groups and not, 21 and over people that are hungry and thirsty, but everyone, people that are out hanging out. I think that's a big part of the vitality too. So no doubt there's a voice for development as a key to vitality, but I think there's some complexities of things we can do that are low cost and impact that bring folks into town. So I would just encourage us to, hold a big place for that as part of our discussions. So that's what I have for now. I appreciate the time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Anything else on this before we keep going? Great discussion.
One thing I'd like to mention too is that banks have historically been very difficult to deal with because they usually own their properties, have specialized, building forms and things like that.
Well, and I always hate just to jump in. I always hate to mention a specific business or even when we bring up specific restaurants and what they look like, I try to avoid. But, as an example in sort of a parallel universe, I know that has been a comment and we appreciate their presence in our city, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just saying as if 5% of our footprint kind of swapped out in terms of who was there and what they were doing, that could have as big an impact as a zoning change. So
yeah, we're not trying to cast any aspersions either, but I think it's a general trend. The purposes of banks and the way people use banks are changing dramatically. So much of banking is online now. You can do almost anything from an ATM. You're not going to stand in line and see a teller necessarily. So that may change the perspective of some of these banking companies, not just in Hermosa, but everywhere, in terms of how they think about their banks, their facilities, and they could be adapted to other uses. And certainly, they're kind of blank spaces in a commercial district because they don't really generate that much traffic, and other things could go in there. You could imagine converting that to some kind of a live entertainment kind of function or some market hall or something like that that could be really cool and an adjunct. But that's just another trend that's kind of in the wind that we'll probably see some more changes coming out of that. We've kind of covered a lot of the work from home aspects. I won't spend any time on that, but the work from home for the beach cities and Hermosa Beach in particular is even more accentuated than it is just generally because you have such a wonderful community and it's so beautiful and wonderful place to be. And you can take a break from work and walk out and take a walk down the Strand or go have a lunch someplace or whatever. These beach communities are precious resources. There just aren't that many of them. So I think you're going to see even more a trend in that direction than you might see generally across the board. Let's see. Okay, the last section on here has to do with city policy and role of organizations. And this is all. We were told by numerous people that Hermosa for a long time had a kind of a not pro-business sort of reputation. But it seems like the city is making some real proactive efforts here to engage more with the business community, to think about economic development, to coordinate more with merchants and business owners in the city, to look at some of these things like parking requirements and outdoor dining and things like that that actually could be really helpful to them. So I think that people have a real perception that the city's perspective on how they're dealing with business in the community is changing in a really good way. People did have a lot to say about CUPs, and generally, I think that there's a recognition that they have been valuable in some respects, and particularly having to do with kind of mitigating some of the late night rowdiness from the bars. But there was other concerns that they were maybe in some cases a little over prescriptive, like where they are defining, what percentage of your business could be food and how much could be alcohol and things like that, that may not even be that easy for a business to meter or moderate. And that there are issues around transfer of businesses. And I don't pretend to be an expert on this, so if I'm saying something wrong, you'll correct me, but that, additional conditional uses can be, or CUPs can be imposed on the transfers of businesses, which some people have said is problematic in terms of, conducting that kind of business and retaining and improving some of the businesses that would require that. People mentioned that the city in the past didn't really have a strategy for the downtown. And I think, this is, again, just a witness of the fact that the city is really being proactive on that now, and people do appreciate it. And the Chamber of Commerce is, again, at the risk of, I'm not trying to be critical of anybody, but there were a lot of comments about how it had really become kind of moribund and not really very effectively working with the businesses and not serving as kind of a clearinghouse for business issues. And there are people that are joining the chamber and looking to inject new energy into that with the intention of having it be a more, a stronger and more viable kind of a business organization that can help businesses work together and work with the city, for the betterment of the downtown and other areas. There has been, again, these are all kind of good things, and people are appreciative of some of the code amendments that have been made, for signage and things like that make it easier for businesses to do some certain things that they want to do. And the Cypress area was noted as being a place where, some of the parking requirements there were alleviated that really helped to make that district thrive. And that some of the things that are being talked about, I don't think they've been adopted yet, about events, festivals, activities in that area, and the ability for the artists and makers to sell their wares would be things that could actually continue to improve the vitality of that little district. So kudos to the city. I think everybody is feeling very good about the initiatives that have been taken to really engage more with the business community and to do good things for the town.
All right, any comments, additional comments or questions or input? Yes, Dave.
I've got a hand in there somewhere. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, appreciate the dialogue and specific to CUPs. I mean, I approve them. I don't always like them or the process, but I think as a city, there's a lot of support for having something that would be more tenant specific than land specific, but we have limits, and I've inquired of this with our city attorney's office, and in some cases that is due to either California law or just our limits. I mean, when someone say wants to expand alcohol or whatever, we have to look not just at the person asking for the permit, but who might occupy it and how they might use it. So point well taken. And I would agree. I think the chamber's moving in a great direction, so I appreciate that. One question I have is, and I'm surprised nobody has asked it before, one would be next steps. I mean, this is a draft of an executive summary, so just kind of the timeline, and also who is being interviewed. I mean, obviously the city looks based, and the perspectives are based on who we've talked to. Who is on that list, and when might we see that, either by name or an aggregate in terms of the mix? I would be very curious to know that.
Yeah, it's a cross section of people, and we can include a list if that's appropriate in the report. But it's a combination of brokers, restaurant owners, business owners, people in civic organizations, and kind of business promotion groups. So it's a cross section, and we consulted with staff about, who would be good people to talk to, and some people we reached out to we weren't able to connect with, but a lot of them we were. We're certainly willing to, do some more outreach, within limits if we've missed any important voices in the community, and it's important to get them and make sure that they're included. We'll be happy to do some more of those.
I mean, it would be helpful to know. I mean, it obviously not to attribute comments, because that's not cool, but in terms of knowing who commented, I think that would be appropriate as part of the public record. Just a general comment, and I was down in my hometown of Long Beach this weekend in what they call the East Village near downtown, and then also in Belmont Shore. I mean, to me, always the challenge with our town is you can design a street to move a lot of people through it quickly, a corridor, or you can design it to have retail and engagement and shopping. it's hard to do both unless you have something that's extraordinarily wide. So, I mean, walking around East Village, just east of downtown Long Beach, a lot of it's laid out like a grid. There's a lot of streets that you can, block off or move around, and it doesn't massively impact local residents in the way that, say, Upper Pier or others, Hermosa Ave. So, I mean, in any thoughts? I know this is an economic study and not a planning study or a traffic flow study, but to me, that's always the, how you turn our streets and areas into sort of these utility players that can be very efficient at moving people in and out of town when we need to, and can be very efficient for people, lingering and hanging out and either spending money or just, God forbid, just for free interacting with each other and enjoying life. That's really kind of the holy grail. And I don't have the answer, but I think that's always something to think about, because we do have those two sets of perspectives. And being someone that has, since in the 30 years I've lived in the South Bay, I've driven to Orange County and downtown, and I've also worked from home and ridden my bike to Playa Vista for a job I had there. And the city feels really, really different. And if you live and work close by, you forget the pains of commuting. And if you're commuting, you forget the joy of people that are local and want to hang local. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I appreciate your work and effort and your openness to our comments. I look forward to seeing the final. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Other comments, thoughts? I'll weigh in. It's really great to hear that we're getting some traction and some notice for changes in the quote unquote business climate. And it occurs to me that we could all take advantage of that bit of good news by making sure that our chamber is well aware that this is a great thing to be able to promote, and certainly in any ways that we can promote it as well as our business owner partners, so that residue kind of continues to fade, and we don't miss out on that great work that is being accomplished. So it's just a footnote I had, and it would be great if we could do something else with those gigantic banks. Looking forward to that trend as soon as we know more.
You're not alone in that one.
All right. If there are no more comments at this moment, I will go ahead and open it up for public comment. At this time, we will take public comment. If you're on the Zoom call, you can raise your virtual hand. I know we have at least one or two. And so I will start with Ed Hart, who I know has had his hand up for a bit. Ed, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Well, first I want to thank all of you for caring to do the right thing and having this conversation. I don't know whether to pose my comment as a comment or as a question, because in reality, it is both. And that is, we have to make a decision as a community that are we looking to future or are we looking to the past? For example, the decisions that we are making right now is about the future. And in the future, are we going to have more cars in the future? Are we going to need more parking in the future, or we need less parking in the future? And I really want to ask Martha to answer that, because not only the city council, not only the planning commission, the whole community doesn't understand or is not on the same page. Do we need more parking? If we need more parking, then we need parking restrictions. We need parking. We need all of that. And as the owner, then I would need to put more parking in my back. I need to put more parking everywhere, because in the future we need more parking. However, if we need less parking, because the data shows that electric bikes are being sold more, people are working out of their homes, and they're not going to the office, then the answer is we need less parking. And if we need less parking, why do we need parking restrictions? We don't need parking restrictions because we're not going to have parking. We're not going to have that much car. That's one point. The other, so I really want everybody to be on the same page because I'm okay either way. The second point is, Commissioner Hoffman, the idea of mixed use with homes on top, it has a lot to do with Economic Development Committee. Why, you would ask? Because the new study shows that people are working from home. When people work from home and the home happen to be on Pier Avenue or happen to be everywhere, they are going to spend their time. They're not going to be home all day and all night. They're going to get on the streets. They're going to go to parquets. They're going to go to restaurants. This is the 21st century. These are the future. And we can't just go back to having offices that nobody wants to build. And Commissioner Hoffman wants everybody to build offices, but offices don't work. Really, we have Marlin Equity that occupying a lot of properties right on Pier Avenue, and in reality, not really adding anything to the economy. It's really not adding to the there are no nice restaurants there that there should have been, because in the past, the Planning Commission decided not to have anything other than offices. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I had my timer going. I noticed we lost our clock here. So, but you were under time anyways. Thank you for being on the line and providing comment. I will go to Tony Cordy, who's got his hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
First off, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for having this forum in the first place. I think it's fantastic. I liked both presentations and the ensuing conversation. So thank you for all of that. Just a few things, if I may, some clarifying and just some other comments. We were talking about the business and the perception of how things are in the city now, and there's definitely a palpable shift. I can tell because of the people that I'm talking to who are taking on new spaces in downtown. And I want to just do a shout out for Christy, because she's been awesome in both some owners that I've introduced her to, owners of property, new tenants or prospective tenants. She's been so great at facilitating, getting questions answered and all that. And I think that's just wonderful. So thank you, Christy. A couple of other things here on the ABC stuff. You were talking about the ABC classifications. They're subjective at best and they're localized. So I was just looking at the definitions of them for CoStar, which is the company that owns LoopNet. And I wouldn't put a whole lot into that, although we do know that A's typically are the brand new, shiny buildings that have all the great amenities or whatever, but it's all relative and subjective. So I would say take it for what it's worth. And along those same lines, the storefront retail stats that I heard on vacancies, I don't think we have a whole lot. I mean, I don't think we have hundreds of storefront retail units. But if you have like one building, like the new one on 14th and Hermosa Avenue with 6 vacancies, that will really throw off I would think it would really throw off your numbers. Again, it's relative to how many units there are. The good news is that up until a week ago, the target rents for those were just way out of, they were out of touch with the market. They were a total of like $8+ a foot. And that's just not where we are right now. But a new agent has taken over that listing, has lowered the prices, and there's a lot of activity in that building. So I'm pretty confident that over the next couple of months, we'll see those 6 vacancies filled, and that will affect the vacancy rate for downtown. Plus, we're seeing a lot of other action, which is really great. So I just wanted to make a comment about that. Another thing is just with respect to businesses and success and that type of thing. If we look in local communities and other areas, we can see that chef-driven stuff can do just as well as anything else as far as profitability and so on. And if you look at some of our most successful restaurants, at least from my perspective, in terms of revenue production per square foot and all that type of stuff, restaurants like Hook and Plow and The Source and those types of places are doing extremely well. So you can make good money without necessarily having any alcohol or a very strong alcohol content, for what it's worth. And I'm not saying anything about the bars or anything like this. I'm just saying that there's certainly successful models that don't require late night operation or any of that type of thing. I think that's all I had. So I just wanted to share that.
Great, Tony. Thank you for being here to provide those insights and comments. I will go to Dean Francois. Dean, are you there?
Hi. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you
I can hear you.
Great. Yeah, I wanted to comment earlier in the meeting and actually wasn't able to because the link was not working, but I cut and pasted the link from the minutes and finally got in okay. So I went off to another meeting and came back. But I just want to make a quick comment. I'm glad you're doing this. You're working hard and it's good to see too planning commissioners here with different types of perspectives. And it always helps to have council members interact with them and with the public because the public and businesses don't always understand and appreciate what's really involved. You just can't magically solve parking problems. So that's really all I wanted to state. And just with regards to the other speaker, I happen to agree with Commissioner Hoffman's perspective that mixed use really can't work right down in Pier Plaza. But obviously there are other parts of the city where it can work to possibly solve some residential needs and create a good mix for the future. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean. John David, are you there? John David, do you have your hand up? Yeah. Okay, I will pass to.
Hello.
Oh, there you are.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you very much. It's been a great meeting, so I appreciate that. I just kind of want to, share my thoughts that, our society, our lives and our society are changing really quickly. We talked about retail a little bit, and whether we like it or not, I mean, the trends are heading towards retail is declining. Work from home is increasing. Cars will be disappearing. Technology is giving us that. And I really think what's going to end up in 20 years is just a lot of experiential businesses on the downtown. So, the most important thing about all that is that, tomorrow is going to be different. So today we need to be different. So I just want to make that whatever has happened in the past, whatever we think is going to happen based on the past isn't going to. As far as mixed use, I just also want to show another perspective is that the idea that allowing, I call them work, live, lofts because that's my vision for it, but allowing mixed use is going to end up with residential dominating upper floors. I don't see that. I actually see if it was allowed, if we had flexibility, you would have some people that want to develop residential and some people want to develop office. Ideally, things are set up so it could be either. Because again, tomorrow is going to be different. From my personal perspective, being a property owner, commercial property owner, having done this for quite a long time, it's not really clear that residential has a financial incentive. The financial incentive would only be it allows flexibility to survive with changing society. But I can tell you this, that, 1,000 square foot office space in Hermosa Beach, it'll rent out for $3,750. That would have the tenant covering all the expenses, including insurance. You can take the same thing as an apartment, not a 3,000 square foot house, but as an apartment, and maybe you're getting $4,000 for it, but you're going to end up with $1,000 worth of expense, and you're going to have to service your tenant. So it's not really clear. Office commercial space is great. My biggest, it's profitable, but my biggest concern is that there won't be the demand for it in the future. And if it's empty space, it'll do nothing to help the city. So that's really, I really would like to see flexibility. Lastly, Marlin Equity has been brought up. We do have Marlin Equity in Upper Pier. And I don't know if people recognize it, but the two buildings on the 400 block of Pier Avenue, they're empty all the time. I mean, I got to tell you, maybe I see somebody there once every 3 months. I don't think people work from there. They may work from the one down lower, but that is wasted space. There's nobody there to contribute to the economy. So I'm not sure just because it's office and it's Class A office, automatically you're going to have any contribution to the economy in downtown. Anyhow, thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Lori Ford, are you still with us?
I am. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very, very clearly.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been a really great meeting. I'm really encouraged to hear first report from the consultants. I guess I should say for the public that we own Gumtree, and I just want to say that we have been there for 12 years, and when we started, 200 Pier, wasn't finished yet, and I just want to impress upon you all that all of those offices, when that did fill up, it was a game changer for our business, our daytime business, to have daytime, population in downtown that was working in those offices. And that it really did make a difference. And we do, occasionally take cafe lunch orders from Marlin Equities, and we appreciate those too. So while I wish that the office space downtown was all, on second floor, and that the retail and restaurant and snack shop could stay downstairs, that would be, my preference. And with building offices, not ground floor office, but upstairs office, because it really does help to serve the downtown daytime businesses. Oh gosh, I had one other thing and now I've forgotten it. What was it? Yeah, I guess that's it. Maybe I'll remember later. But thank you. That was really informational.
Yeah. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks.
Okay, I have somebody who looks like they're on a phone line. So I have a person on the phone with their hand raised. Oh, yep, there it is. You have to press *6 and just speak up, and we should be able to hear you. *6 on your phone.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. This is Jonathan Wicks. Thank you to staff and the consultants and commissioners and council members for moving this forward. I just want to maybe throw out an observation or a statistic. The amount of space it takes to provide a parking stall for one vehicle is roughly the same amount of space it takes to provide a studio apartment. So there certainly is room on second levels for maybe not condos all the way up and down Pier or PCH or Aviation, but there is a way to build more multifamily. And I think, we're seeing a shift in adoption now to more of a village and localized type of economy. And certainly seems like more people are working from home, and that is, that will remain. So I just want to encourage us to think about the amount of space that we have and how we can best utilize that space, and where we can fit additional people, and as well as additional revenue sources and tax base for our city to meet our long-term goals. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Great, Jonathan. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm not seeing any additional hands raised, nor do I see any phone lines, unless staff can tell me otherwise. Oh, wait. Oh, Lori had her hand back up because I think she remembered her second point. So I'm going to go ahead and let her take it. Lori, come on back and give us your second point.
Thank you. I'll keep it to under the minute that I have left. I just remembered that, I think if there's a silver lining as a small business owner to this pandemic, as it is that people have really come to understand how important shopping small and supporting small business is. It's just, people are understanding that if they don't go into that small business, it's not going to be there anymore. So while we are, I know, seeing a lot of trends in the, Madison Avenues and Fifth Avenues, all the big retailers closing stores, I think that there really is it feels like, especially in the South Bay, which is such a close-knit community, we're so grateful to be here. We've really thrived after the initial horror of the beginning of the pandemic. People have been so supportive of the small businesses in town. So I think that is a direction I feel that will continue to go forward. So I have actually a lot of hope for vibrant, small business-filled downtowns in the future. So that's just what we're seeing and hearing from our clients and friends.
Nice to hear. Nice to hear. All right. Thank you for hopping back on. Give that additional insight. And I'll give one more look. Last call for public comment. I see no more hands, and it doesn't look like we have any active phone lines. Oh, hand popped up. Laura Pena.
Hi, this is Laura. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I wanted to thank you all for this very lively discussion, a lot of diversity of opinion. I really appreciated it. It added a lot to the reports that were given. I appreciate Commissioner Peterson's request for finding out who these people were that they talked to, because that adds a little bit more depth to the report. I wanted to bring up something that didn't have much to pertain here, but I didn't know if the Economic Development Committee realized. I think it came from this committee, the suggestion to add ambient music in our outdoor dining decks. And that was subsequently ended January 15th. So if we could have the Economic Development Committee kind of put that back on the table again for the City Council, that would be helpful. I've talked to a lot of restaurants in Upper Pier, and they would love it. They would really love just have ambient music, not live, not bands, just ambient music in the outdoor dining decks, and that would help with some of the vitality and excitement. So that's the only thing I wanted to add. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Okay, let's see. Last call for public comment at this juncture. And seeing no additional hands go up and no phone lines live, I will go ahead and...
Chair Campbell,
yes.
Brian unmuted himself. I don't know if he wanted to speak.
Oh, okay. Brian Dunn?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, we're with Details Tile and Stone on Pacific Coast Highway. It's a wonderful place, so please stop by if you can. I wanted to thank Maureen Hunt, who is the retired president of the chamber. And I'm wishing Jessica Accomado a great future. She's really talented, and I'm getting to know what she's like. The emphasis on looking to the future has been very important in this whole discussion this evening, and I compliment everybody for that. The coastal area is very strong. You drive around different parts of Los Angeles, and so many stores are closed, so many lease signs are up. We have our challenges here, but yet we are in a much better position because of the community that we're in. I would like to say that public-private partnerships could be a way that we could be improving the downtown Hermosa area, and they should be investigated on. I have a couple of ideas on that myself. Electric cars coming into the future, it might decrease the amount of cars that are demanded to be around. So that is something that we should all be worried, not worried about, but aware of. Finally, I want to thank Christy Teague for being such a great person. I've gotten to know her a little bit on the Stakeholders Advisory Group. And last thing I want to say is in the Los Angeles Business Journal, I saw that made reference to last November, the sales of single-family residences. Hermosa Beach came in second on the increase of single-family residents over a prior year. And we're really, some people would say improving, and some people might not say improving, but yet we're going in a very solid and good direction. And Madam Chairman, I want to thank you very much. Bye.
muted myself. Thank you, Brian, for being here and weighing in. Great discussion, great comments. Seeing no more hands, last call for comments at this time. All right, I'll go ahead and close public comment and we will move on. That was a lot we got through. And we are at item number 10 on the agenda, economic development strategy topic, continue discussion of corridors and gateways. Christy.
Yes, and actually before that, back to number 8, we passed up the stakeholder advisory working group update. So I'm going to back up a bit. I provided meeting notes from our 2 meetings, and at the February 3rd stakeholder meeting, we discussed our topic of the month, which is gateways and corridors. And I recommend that we continue that conversation with our stakeholders group and then bring that back actually as our discussion topic for next month, if that's okay with the group. So also wanted to see which committee members would like to attend our next 2 committee meetings. We had Dave Peterson join us on February 3rd. Commissioner Peterson, thank you for that. And Commissioner Hoffman joined us on February 17th. On February 17th at our stakeholders meeting, we had a similar presentation from Martha Miller discussing the targeted parking amendments. And that conversation is different from what our Wednesday night study session conversation is going to be with the Planning Commission and City Council. That'll be more broad code discussion. It'll include some of our parking. But wanted to check with committee members and see who can join us at our next meetings on Wednesday, March 3rd and Wednesday, March 17th at 2 p.m. with our stakeholders advisory group.
Christy, right now it looks like I could do either one. So I'm happy to do this week or wait if anybody else wants to grab one or the other. Mayor Pro Tem, which one would you like?
I can do March 3rd, but I'm on duty the 17th.
Okay, I'll tag myself for the 17th then.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We sure appreciate it. And sometimes the discussion's a little bit different than it is at our full Economic Development Committee meeting. So I know we all appreciate your participation. It helps make those complementary activities more successful. So thank you for that.
I thank you for coordinating. I agree with you. It's adds to our progress. And yeah, I just realized, Christy, that I had jumped when I went to public comment. I had scrolled too far. So anyway, thanks for going back to that. So with that, where are we at now?
So number 9 is economic development strategy topic. So we're going to continue discussion of corridors and gateways next month, and we'll have more time for that discussion. Tonight we were listening to our consultants, and so we'll get back to our regular working topic about corridors and gateways next month. And then the next thing on the list is business recovery updates. And we do have updates. Leanne Singleton is on the line, and she's going to provide recent business updates.
Awesome.
Good evening. We don't have a presentation for you this evening. A lot of the business health protocols and measures have been in place for quite a while. I think everyone's aware of the update that outdoor dining was allowed to resume at the end of the previous month. And so we're seeing a couple weeks now with outdoor dining occurring and continuing to see cases, the rate of COVID cases dropping, and some good news on the vaccine front that we're seeing more and more people getting vaccinated. So The updates for this evening, I will be brief on. We do have a couple of new businesses that have opened in recent months that I wanted to highlight, and a couple of additional businesses that we expect to see. Maybe you've seen a sign up for them, or you've heard that they've leased a space that are coming soon. So the couple of businesses to highlight that are now open, I wanted to highlight the Stanton. They're on Hermosa Avenue. They opened a couple of weeks ago. I think they're easing into, I think they started with dinner. Maybe they've now expanded to dinner and happy hour, and then adding brunch in as well on some of their weekends. Two Guns Espresso is sharing space with Sugar Dane on Pier Avenue. They've been open for a bit, but wanted to make sure we got them highlighted. And then we have a new bike shop located on PCH called Burn the Ships Electrics. And it's actually bikes as well as a series of other electric equipment. So, when we talk about the trends of e-bikes and e-scooters and skateboards and all sorts of devices, I believe they even sell e-surfboards, so electric surfboards. So quite the variety there. I have not had a chance yet to go and check it out, but I know they're open, and I think the demand for these types of devices has grown exponentially over the last year, and so you're seeing that manifest in a number of new bike shops, bike repair shops, bike fitters coming into town and opening up shop. In terms of businesses that we know of that are opening soon, we have had a lot of activity on Hermosa Avenue. So I think some of the previous speakers that talked about vacancies, we have had a number of spaces that have been vacant for a while on Hermosa Avenue, either due to remodel or due to changes in businesses. So the Santo Hair Salon should be coming soon. Japonica Sushi, I heard, is supposed to be opening for to-go orders starting on Friday. So I'll reach out to them and make sure that we can get them highlighted, help welcome them to town. They have a location in Redondo Beach already, and I think quite a good following from Redondo Beach that I think folks will be excited to see them here in Hermosa. We have Agave Azul, which has taken over the standing room spot. They're working on some remodels to that. We don't have an opening date that we've heard just yet, but you can see the sign outside and you can see activity going. So another Hermosa Avenue business coming soon. We also have a new beach rental place, Pop Beach Rentals, which is, again, also on Hermosa Avenue in the I think it's called Sandcastle Plaza, just south of 10th Street there. Practical Magic Apothecary is in that spot as well. And the last one I have on our list of kind of folks that have gotten their business licenses signed off and are setting up shop is a spot called Permanent Glow. It's a personal care shop. And I don't have the address or the location on that one, but just wanted to provide a couple of quick updates on some of our new businesses. I think we're seeing a lot of interest and reinvestment in some of these spaces.
Nice. It feels good to hear that long list. Any questions for Leanne? Just have a quick one about the comment about ambient music. I know that was like a holiday deal, right? Originally. Is that something that we can discuss at the right time? Just to see if it's something we want to explore or add to our list of, kind of things that are in the same bucket. Or is there an opinion about that that I don't know about?
I'll share that, we had put that staff report together and put that in front of the council just days before, probably in the same exact timing as when outdoor dining was directed to close in the fall. And so I'll defer to our city manager as to the timing of, maybe there's an opportunity for another trial run that we can bring that back to council for discussion.
Yeah, in fact, I meant to say that as soon as we got that, everything shut down, kind of almost all at the same time. You want to think about that, Madam City Manager?
No, I was waiting. Commissioner Peterson had his hand up, so I thought I'd just wait first.
Yeah, I did see that. Sorry, Commissioner Peterson.
No, that's okay. I would just, to the comment just raised, I would add my, encouragement if, at the discretion of the council just to bring it up. I always worry in these meetings, by the time we talk about something, that agendize it, then they agendize it, time passes. And, if the city council has the purview to do that, I would just recommend agendizing it, and within reason, I would be in favor of it. And the other comment I had or question, and maybe Leanne can answer it, or maybe Madam City Manager, but as we're starting to see, hopefully, spread of vaccination and at least a little bit of, I hate to say herd immunity, but we're getting closer. What is the mindset on when we either unwind or extend outdoor dining and those sorts of things? I mean, I think there are certain dates that's through, but I'm hoping, I don't need an answer tonight, but I'm hoping that there's some mindset in terms of when we hit certain milestones, do we then have sort of a 6-month ticking clock in terms of, from a planning perspective and a city operations perspective, what we extend, what we modify, what we dial back in terms of, either parklets or street striping, or I'm just curious what the thought process is on that, because I think that's important to have a plan, because it'll be here hopefully before we know it. Is there any thought on that?
So there is a time frame when this will come back to the council to provide us direction with the outdoor dining, and that is a 6-month time frame. Leanne, what's the date?
June, I think, isn't it?
Douglas?
It would be.
I'll kick that to Doug.
It would be July, I want to say 16th, roughly around then, because we started mid-January.
Yeah. And so that's not a trigger based on herd immunity as much as the time frame that council gave us as staff to explore this, create the environment for the businesses that do want to expand, take our notations, make our adjustments and all of that, and then come back to the council with our findings, which will include feedback from the businesses that are participating in this. So I don't know if that answered your question, but we'll look at that time.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I know the concern of business was always having long enough time frames to make adjustments and pay for them and pay out dining decks, et cetera. And I was just curious. I know there was sort of a 6 months. So as we approach July, City Council can extend, modify based on what they see.
Correct.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you both for your answer. Appreciate it. Doug, good to see you.
And on the music question, Chair Campbell, I wanted to just share that this did come up originally in the Economic Development Committee, and it was discussed briefly at council, not as an agenda item last time, but we've had folks, I'll say specifically, Adam Mulvaney has brought up the idea some time back as well. I don't know in relation to when the pandemic started, was it before or after, but within the last year, and he's referencing a program that's referred to as the juried music program or the juried arts program, similar to what we discussed downtown Santa Monica has in their promenade area. So you assign through a lottery system or some kind of an RFP or an RFQ mechanism, ability for artists or music, in this case, musicians, to be present in the public right-of-way. I think what we can do as staff, and I'm looking to our team here, Ken, Christy, Leanne, Doug, and myself, to look into this and perhaps bring back a version of what Leanne's staff report included for the holiday time, but for non-holiday time period. And if you'd like to, and we can present this to council as something to consider during this trial period as we make our way to July. So the soft answer is yes, but I know there's some work that we need to put into this. And I know Christy had just jotted it down as one of the ideas coming from this committee, but it seems that there's greater interest coming from the committee. So like you said, Commissioner Peterson, is between this committee and then going to the council, there might be a big gap, but we've heard it enough times for us to look into it. So I will commit that we as a staff will work something up and see where the council's interest is. Okay. It won't make everyone happy. That's the only thing. Just there's a lot of talent, and we can't have all the talent displayed at one time, and so it's hard to make everyone happy in this scenario. But if we can improve or bring life and the vitality that we talked about earlier to our downtown, it's something that we'd certainly like to have the council consider.
Okay, that sounds great, actually, to me anyway. And I just want to clarify, because maybe I misunderstood the holiday ambient music. Was that not live music and only like through speakers? And can we include maybe both kinds of things at the same time, like as Suja was describing, like an option for maybe something small, in addition to, say, someone who has outdoor dining, having just speakers like you see everywhere in resorts. You walk by and you can only hear it when you're kind of walking by, like some ambient, pleasant music or something. But.
So what I recall, and Leanne can let me know for sure, what I recall from the conversation was an interest in both, that some businesses had interest in the ambient music and others may have wished to sponsor a small scale live musician.
Makes sense.
Is that correct, Leanne?
I believe there's interest in both, and so we can work to incorporate both of those into the discussion.
And is it not, I know there had also been some discussion of having some of the live performance, such as it is, to be in the public realm, so be on a few spots along Pier Plaza or similar, as opposed to being on private property as a live act. All in favor?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if
it's worth discussion.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
why not?
Throw that in the mix.
Absolutely, as long as we're at it. Whatever's worth discussing, I guess. All right, anything else for these two? Okay, seeing no more hands. Thank you for that. And we are at...
So 10B, a shared streets update, and Doug Krause will provide an update on the shared streets.
Great.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. We're still monitoring it, and obviously as weather gets better and there's more people, we get a better sense of what to look out for on the streets with the lane reconfigurations. We had one of our traffic engineers out there this weekend studying and monitoring, and so we are anticipating some changes to some of the timing of the traffic signals on Hermosa Avenue and Pier Avenue in the coming weeks. So hopefully, obviously we wouldn't do that if we didn't think it would help, and it should, and you might be seeing some changes soon, looking at maybe a sign or two that can help as well. But again, we're kind of taking it slow and just monitoring. And if you haven't been down there, pretty much every single deck down there has expanded already. And we have 2 brand new decks coming to Hermosa Avenue, specifically Hermosa Avenue. On Pier, we have a new one coming that will be expanded in probably this week, if not by next week. So it's getting there. People are taking advantage. So that's my update.
All right, great. Thanks, Doug. Any questions for Doug? All right. Thank you for being here for that. Okay, so we are at our last opportunity for public comment. We've probably exhausted everybody on that already, but give it one more opportunity. If anyone on the line would like to give public comment, now is your chance and your last chance at that. So I will go ahead and call on Laura Pena.
Hi, I just wanted to add one more comment. I forgot to say something. In regards to the economic and market report, one of the things that I found missing was that there was this discussion about the medium home value. And I heard from one of the commenters tonight about the home value. I feel like the commercial value property should also be included in this report, just so that we have a complete picture of what's happening in our city. So I think if we added that to this report, that might be able to give us a much broader perspective of really what's happening. That's just my only suggestion. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Laura. Tony Cordy.
Hi, just a couple of updates real quick on Pier Plaza. We're going to see a couple of big announcements coming out soon, as early as this week, in fact, for some of the larger spaces there. So I think pretty exciting news for Hermosa Beach. So let's look forward to that. I think it'll be great.
Wow, what a great cliffhanger, Tony. Thank you. All right, anybody else? I'm seeing no more hands, so now's your last chance if you wanted to get in here tonight before we are finished. Ed Hart.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of small comments. I was surprised that the restaurant owners survey showed that they weren't uncomfortable with lack of parking. Because in reality, when city wants to impose parking restrictions, is the city wants to do it for the good of the businesses or for the good of whom? I don't understand that part, because if businesses are comfortable with less parking and they are thriving with less parking, then in reality, why would we even need parking restrictions? So that's just a question. As far as parquets, that's the same thing. Parquets are taking parkings away, but then everyone seems to be comfortable with it. People are coming, restaurants are flourishing. So again, so I don't understand the part about parking requirements, where everybody's that is into business in reality on daily basis understand that everything is fine. We don't need parking requirements. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, I'm seeing no further hands up, no phone lines active. And so I will go ahead and I will close public comment, and believe we are close. So next is committee member announcements and or items for the next agenda. Anybody want to add anything to what we've already added to the agenda? Good work, you guys. All right, so with that, if there are no further comments, staff, Christy, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, not really. I want to talk with the group about timing for our economic development strategy. We're getting close to being able to figure out like when and how, but I don't know if I'll have that for April, but I'm hoping in the next month or two to be able to kind of provide a picture of what we have and then allow for feedback if we're missing anything.
Awesome. And congrats on the shout outs you got, Christy, this evening. That's awesome too. So, all right. If there are no further additions, I will be happy to adjourn tonight's meeting until our next meeting on April 5th at 6 o'clock. Same bat channel. And in the meantime, have a great evening, everybody.